meeting remotely and ask for your cooperation and patience with that. We will adjourn this meeting this afternoon in the memory of those lives lost to COVID and those that have been hurt. And also we will recognize the passing of a giant in American history, Representative Lewis. And we will talk about that a little bit later, I'm sure. But with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Gordo,
Here.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Here.
Councilmember Madison,
Here.
Councilmember Masuda,
Here.
Councilmember McAustin,
Here.
Councilmember Wilson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Blessed to be here.
Mayor Tornick.
Here.
There's a quorum of the council present.
Thank you for all being so timely. Mr. Wilson, can you lead us in the pledge?
I'd be happy to. So we could stand. Place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
of the
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have an important ceremonial item today. We're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. This was a piece of landmark legislation that's had a profound impact on many people in our country. And we have a proclamation that says, whereas on July 26, 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was signed into law, guaranteeing persons with disabilities equal opportunity in public accommodations, commercial facilities, employment, transportation, state and local government services, and telecommunications. And whereas since then, the ADA has enabled more persons with significant mental and physical disabilities
I know he's looking down on us right now, and I'm grateful that we continue to stay steadfast and continue to do the work that he has held the torch for so long. So thank you, Mayor, for this acknowledgement.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to ask that we hold all of our comments for Representative Lewis, which I'm sure many will have, to the end of the agenda, because he was such an important figure. I want to make sure that we give him his due. We have one other sort of quasi-ceremonial matter. I'd like to give the clerk an opportunity to remind us all of the importance of participating in the census. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity. The 2020 census self-response period is going on now. I want to urge all Pasadena residents to complete the 2020 census today. Pasadena's current self-response rate is at 64.6% as of today. It's 10 questions that take about 10 minutes and can be completed online at my2020census.gov or by calling. There are several toll-free numbers, but the one in English is 844-330-2020. The one in Spanish is 844-468-2020. At the last 2010 census, based on the responses, the city of Pasadena received over $400 million in funding over the last 10 years. And that's funding to support schools, transportation, housing, and health programs that serve our most vulnerable populations in Pasadena. So I just want to urge everyone, it's time, it's today, it's now. Please take the time to please complete your census. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask Mark just a couple questions. I'm just curious, you mentioned 64.6%, Mark.
That's correct.
Are we lagging? I'm just curious what the impact has been relative to historical returns, and what is a realistic target in terms of return rate? How far away from our goal? Obviously, 100% would be ideal.
Right, 100% would be ideal. This is the self-response rate. So this is the rate that's used for census that will go, the U.S. Census Bureau that will go out to households. But when you compare to 2010, we were 71.3% for the city. So we're below that. No doubt COVID has impacted us. We aren't able to hold in-person events to urge and educate residents on how to complete the census and why it's important. So really, we're hoping to get as much communication out to the public. We've been doing a lot of meetings and putting out a lot of information. So we are lagging behind, but we have been making some strides in the last couple of weeks. And so I want to continue that momentum. LA County is going to make a big push this week. So together with them, we're gonna try and make more announcements at all the meetings and push out information via social media and other ways.
Thanks for that information, and thank you for your leadership on this important effort.
Thank you.
I would simply like to speak directly to District 3, challenging to respond to these types of, particularly the census, but it's critically important that you, my constituency, residents of the city of Pasadena, fill out your census form. It's very quick. I did it online, and ensures that the city of Pasadena receives its due share of federal money and pass-through to benefit all of the residents of the city of Pasadena. It's critical in so many other areas than just
and people just need to step up and be counted. And apart from the money, this has to do with representation as well. And there is a increasing possibility that we will lose one or possibly two seats in California in the congressional delegation, and one of the most vulnerable will be ours in terms of having our district chopped up and reconfigured in a way that may not be to our advantage. So please, folks, I mean, this is a fairly minimal request. You can respond online, or you can do it on the telephone. And of course, there will be people starting to go around to the door, but nobody's anxious to have that happen these days.
Right.
So, it would be much better to respond online or on the telephone and not have to deal with someone in person. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jomsky. Let's move to the consent calendar. Are there items that council members would, Councilmember McAustin?
Yes, I have questions on item 11 and 15, please.
11 and 15, okay. Councilmember Madison?
Item 17, please, Mayor.
17. All right. Anybody else? Gene?
5 and 14, they kind of go together, Mayor.
5. Okay. Anybody else?
I move whatever the balance.
One second, John. I want to do a recap here. And I've got the questions on 10. So what I've got so far is 5, 10, 11, 14, 15, and 17.
18.
18. Gordo
I revised.
calls us and bumps us by one.
No, I just revised it. Let's just have a report on all of them.
No. You don't. There's
I moved the dollar.
I'm sorry, Andy?
What was 19 in the sweep motion? The CalPERS?
Yes.
I would like to, I didn't understand, so sorry to add that. So John, I think your motion of.
Got it.
Okay. Sweep motion for the balance. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Masuda. Roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes,
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes.
That motion was
All right.
approved.
Let's move to 5 and 14.
Thank you, Mayor. This would be addressed to our city manager, and who is Ursula Smith there as well?
I see Mr. Bawa there.
Well, Ms. Bawa, okay, great.
Mitch Dion and Guchar and Bawa are here from the Water and Power Department.
Mitch Dion is perfect as well. Okay, I don't need to tell you that we've had a long drought, and I've been bugging the city manager for a long time about the Sierra Madre median, and this is a great opportunity to consider this demonstration garden project with the Sierra Madre Boulevard median. So that is my suggestion, and if
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. We're bringing supplemental water over to the median area that was let go during the drought. So there would be a sustainable source of water to use for a demonstration garden. And the process like a huticulture makes an attractive feature that could be used to demonstrate water conservation techniques. And with coordination with Public Works, that could be worked out. Yes, sir.
thank you for that. Mayor, I'd like to move to I'd like to support that. I mean, I'll make that motion to approve that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I just just for clarity, is that to support the full median of all of Sierra Madre Boulevard?
No, sir, there
Or
would
just
not be
portion?
enough water to support all the median area on Sierra Madre, just the areas that, two of the blocks, if you would, will be getting supplemental water as a result of the recovery of the drain water. And so it would be an opportunity to put some low water using demonstration things out there, the kind of thing that is suitable for a drive-by type of thing that has to be maintained as little as possible and is not the kind of thing that has to be needing excessive water.
Mitch, at the bottom of, page 1 of the agenda report of number 14, it does call out the, 2 medians along Sierra Madre, as you just suggested.
Yeah.
That's correct. Those two big block areas, right, directly in front of the Jones Reservoir, or directly in front of Hamilton Park, and the one directly to the east of that.
Sure makes a lot of sense. The median is right there next to the Jones Reservoir.
Sure.
What is the plan for the rest of the medians?
Currently, we have not developed a plan for the rest of the median. It was just a potential, as it was laid out, that these two projects could allow for the demonstration project to go in at one of the median sites. Currently, they are maintained with rough grass, minimal maintenance, and not much water.
Thank you. I just, I'm very supportive of this project. I just want to make sure that the medians throughout the city are maintained and look as beautiful as they do, like when you're driving up Memorial Boulevard. So, thank you, Councilman Masuda, for, pulling this and asking that question. I drive Sierra Madre regularly, and the medians definitely can use some work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gordo?
Yeah, I think this is an important point, the issue of medians in general, but certainly this is, a part of our city that's also a gateway into the city and into neighborhoods in East Pasadena. And it's also a recreational opportunity as well. I think a lot of people have, for decades, used the median as an opportunity to recreate, to go for walks. And so staff should come back with a fuller plan on how to achieve both a beautiful gateway as well as enhance the opportunity for recreation along Sierra Madre Boulevard, the entirety of the median, not just 2 blocks.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, Councilmember Gordo, this is the area for the post-Rose Parade as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's an important stretch of the city.
Thank you. Ms. McAustin?
Thank you. I'd just like to make 2 quick points. One is I want to congratulate staff on applying for and getting this grant. This is a really innovative project, and it's good to see Pasadena in a leadership role on this. And I also want to salute whoever it was that put together this grant, because we talk about grants all the time, and we got to, do more and get them and apply for them. This grant application, which was attached, is really long and detailed and complex. I think it just goes to show us that, applying for some of these grants and getting them is no small thing. And it took a lot of work on probably more than just Ursula's part, on several people's part, to accomplish this and get this submitted for this competitive grant. So kudos to them.
Okay, so we have a motion and do we have a second on approving 5 and 14?
Thank you.
Yes, Vice Mayor, thank you. Call the roll, please, Bart.
So this is on 5 and 14, Mayor?
Yes, 5 and 14.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Tornick?
Yes,
Motion is approved without opposition.
thank you. We move to item 10. Ara, I wasn't able to understand quite adequately what the.
Mayor,
extent
can
of
we
the-
wait a moment for the transition as staff steps out and other staff comes in?
Absolutely.
And Mayor, I should mention that on item 15 and 16, which was already approved, we did get some last minute correspondence or
Okay.
public comments. I have to read it.
All right, Mayor, Ara and staff are in position.
Thank you. Mr. Malloyan, this project, I wasn't able to understand adequately from the staff report what the extent of the proposed improvements are and whether, and the funding, is this going to be recaptured through rents from the subtenants, or what is I understand this is a capital improvement, an approved capital improvement project, but can you just give a little bit more detail on what this entails?
Surely, Honorable Mayor. I have Chris Markarian and Hayden Melbourne also here from Public Works, and Mr. Jeffrey Hendar from real estate section also to be able to answer all the questions that you may have. This CIP project was created in 2008. Basically, it is, at that time, it required us to install separate water meters for these tenants. And this is basically the scope of the project. We're installing 4 sub-meters for the tenants in this area, although we have only 3 tenants. We're creating 4 areas for future tenants, if there could be. And also, we're installing 4 fire hydrants and necessary piping for these fire hydrants to be able to serve these areas. So basically, that's the nuts and bolts of this project.
Are there no hydrants up there now?
There's only 1 fire hydrant that I'm aware of.
Okay. So this is not just the meters, it's the hydrants. I guess I missed that.
No, there are hydrants and sub-meters. We're installing
Sub-meters, yeah.
4 sub-meters for water reading.
Understand. And having created these sub-meters, are we going to be billing the tenants for their water use? I mean, how does this fit together with the lease arrangements we have with the 3 subtenants?
The intent is correct. That was the intent, that each tenant can be separately invoiced for the usage of their water. I will have Mr. Hernandez maybe answer how the lease agreements are right now, but that was the intent. The entire intent was to be able to allocate their proportionate use of water in each tenant area.
So is that what's going to happen? Are their leases being modified to reflect that, or do they currently call for it?
Mayor and council members, the current lease with Roswell Riders has language that obligates them to pay for utilities, but then they pay for electricity. But since there's only 1 meter and it doesn't properly allocate their consumption, they have not been paying for water. Neither have the other tenants. Roswell Riders indicates that they do pay for some water that they pull from the fire hydrant to hose down the riding arena. But to answer your question, they have not been paying for water primarily. The new leases that I've been negotiating with Tom Sawyer and Roswell Riders will have them pay a base rent plus all utilities. And I have specific language that submetering of the water is in progress. And the intent is to be a triple net relationship where the tenant pays all utilities.
And who are the other tenants? There were 3 tenants referenced.
There is Roswell Riders, Tom Sawyer Camps, Mach 1, which is the disability equestrian tenant, and then Arroyo Seco Foundation Nursery.
Okay, those are all my questions. Anybody else have any questions? If not, I'll move approval. Is there a second?
Second.
If no further questions, please call the roll on item 10.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson.
We'll give staff a chance to reconfigure.
We're here on.
Okay, Councilmember McAustin?
Thank you. My question on this is about, it mentions that the signage, new signage will be added, including surrounding arterials, and managing all that within a, cohesive manner with the freeway signage, et cetera. My concern here is, Joaquin, is signage clutter. Are we going to be seeing all additional signage on Maple and Corson? And will it be, what type of signage will it be? I'm concerned that we're really getting into a lot of clutter immediately adjacent to the freeway. So if you could provide some more information, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, this is for the record, Joaquin Sicas from the Transportation Department. And the signage that is being installed as part of this project is similar to our changeable message signs that we have out that are dark until they're actually needed to be used. So you won't really notice them when you're driving across them until they're activated with the message to detour people around incidents that may occur on the freeway or on our major arterial streets to try to get people back onto the freeway. So from the standpoint of sign clutter, they'll be there, but you won't really notice them until they turn on.
So how many arterials will they be on, Joaquin? I mean, or how many additional signs are we talking about?
I will check that number. Chris Markarian from Public Works.
There are a total of 17 signs on Mountain and Walnut.
So the total of 17 each, or the total of 17?
There are a total of 17 signs in 15 locations. There are 2 locations that the signs, there are 2 signs per location. So there are a total of 15 locations, but 17 signs.
Are they permanent? Are they permanent, or are they intended to be movable?
They're permanent signs.
And are they all going to be installed on public right-of-way areas?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to bring this up because I think this is one of those kind of creeping issues where we always say we don't want to look like, other cities, and we don't want the the billboards and the clutter and this and that, but we get some of it, and this is something I think we really need to be aware of, and always make sure that we're through the work of our staff that we're pushing back to the extent possible to maintain the character of our city.
I have a question too, if I can. So you said, Joaquin, or maybe Ara, that these 17 signs, 15 locations, they're all on Mountain and Walnut?
I'm sorry, it's maybe Chris can explain the exact locations, but I may have misspoken. It's Mountain and Walnut.
Yeah, they're all 17 signs are on Mountain and Walnut?
Correct. In the back of your agenda, there was a site map with dots. It's on page attachment A. It kind of shows that they're going east-west along the 2 corridors.
Yeah, I'm afraid that the diagram that I have it online, and I wasn't able to understand the locations, but it's on Mountain on Walnut from where to where?
No, they look like they're mostly on Orange Grove.
They are. They're on Orange Grove. I'm sorry, this is Joaquin Sicas from Transportation. They are on Orange Grove, on Mountain, on Maple, and
Oh, I
on
see. Now I see. Fair
Walnut
Oaks.
and Fair Oaks, correct.
Now, the objective, as I understood this project, the point of this was when there was an accident on the freeway or some incident, that the purpose of this is to be able to redistribute traffic around that impediment and then return it when the obstruction is gone. Is that right?
That's correct. So one of the things that happens now is when there is an incident on the freeway, especially if the entire approach is shut down completely, as traffic diverts off the off-ramps, they tend to use streets that are local streets or smaller streets. The intent of this program is to keep the motorist on the larger arterial streets and then divert them back on the freeway as soon as they get past the incident. So sometimes when you're driving and there's something on the freeway, you're not sure when to jump back on the ramp. So this program, in addition to the signage, but also with all of the other components of the program, will be able to get traffic around the incident on the major streets too, so they avoid the smaller streets.
Okay, I see. I've blown it up big enough now where I can see it. Okay, thank you. Ms. McCaustin, do you have any more questions?
Just that, so they will remain off unless there's an incident. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. With that, Mayor, I move approval.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Masuda. Please call the roll, clerk.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes,
Motion is approved without opposition.
thank you. We'll now move to item 15. I assume this will be Bill Wong.
Again, Mayor, just a moment.
Yep.
Mayor, we do have two public comments, but they're the same, so I could read them. They're quick.
Go ahead. Please read them.
This is from Anthony Manusos and Jill Shook. They're essentially the same comments, so I'll read the first one we received. Dear Mayor Tornick and council members, I am writing on behalf of Making Housing and Community Happen. I'm thrilled to see items 15 and 16 coming up for a vote today. We definitely need to apply for state funds for affordable and permanent supportive housing. By all means, pass these resolutions and apply for these funds. As a person of faith, I'm praying that our city will receive the funds needed to address our affordable/homeless housing crisis. And that was submitted by Anthony Manusos, and Jill Shook had essentially the same comment. In support.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councilmember McAustin.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, are you in the house?
Yes, I am.
Hi. Bill, my question is on page 3 of 4, when we talk about the flexibility on the use of these funds, and you mentioned in your last bullet point that some of the funding will be used to supplement the upcoming ADU pilot project. And this is something we've talked about, gosh, it seems like a year ago, but I haven't heard anything about it in a long time. All I would really like on this is for you to provide a brief update as to what that pilot project is and what the status of it is.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember McAustin. The pilot program is something that we have been working on, and we expect to start marketing this pilot in August, September at the latest. And there'll be two parts to it. One part will be to provide financing for homeowners to develop new ADUs that would be used for Section 8 or rental assistance housing. And the second part of the pilot program would be for those who have unpermitted existing ADUs to bring those up to code. And that is more of a life safety measure.
And then what about, we did have discussion many times about the possibility of developing simple ADU plans and having those be online and be downloadable by people who want to build an ADU. Is that still in process, Bill?
Councilmember McAustin, that's a question probably best responded to by David Reyes. He's in the chamber. I'm looking to see if he heard the question. David, the question was, to what extent have we helped identify sort of simple plans for ADUs that residents that are interested in building one might be able to pull from our website as a resource?
Thank you. We had brought to the city council, I believe last month, a request for a grant, was a LEAP, the local early action planning grant. We expect to receive funding for that. But I think the request here is regarding the creation of standard construction plans that would include engineering drawings, and that is part of what the money will be used for. So we expect to receive those funds later in the spring of 2021. And I suspect that we'll have those plans up online probably in the very early spring.
Okay, I just, if we really want to help people with these units, I think this is a great idea. And I hope we can facilitate it and get it up just as soon as possible.
I have a question on this. I didn't understand the attachment, which is the PLHA 5-year plan, the funding allocation. So is this prospective, or, I mean, the dates on here started 2019, but is that because that's when the money was allocated, but the actual expenditures will start in 2020? I mean, I'm having some difficulty making this fit.
Yeah, I'll have Jim Wong field that question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes,
Can't hear Jim.
how's it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The 2019 is basically the state nomenclature for their program year. So we will get our full 5 years of funding.
Okay, and so has the funding been allocated? Has it started yet?
The funding has been allocated to each community in California, but the funding application itself has not started. The deadline is July 27th for these dollars.
For the application?
Yes, the application
so
deadline.
So all these dates will just get pushed forward?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the table, I'm just having some difficulty understanding the way this goes together. I mean, I understood in the summary in the staff report, the allocation, 10% to the reserves, and then the home buyer assistance, 40%, and then the 20 and the ADU 30. But I'm having trouble making that foot with the table. I don't understand how the table works.
Perhaps I can help
Okay.
to simplify it. The table that appears on page 1, all those metrics pertain to the operating reserves, of which
Okay.
Yeah.
So all of that applies to the Centennial Place.
yes, that's correct. And
Okay.
and similarly on page 2, all of those metrics pertain to the
All
workforce
right, now I
housing
understand.
and ADU. Yes.
I got it. All right. That was my question. Anybody else have any questions on item 15? We've heard the public testimony. Is there a motion?
Item 15 and 16 were pulled, or just item 15?
Just 15.
That's 15.
Okay, I don't have a question, but since we're on this topic, and I don't want to bring it up at the end of the meeting, I would like to bring to EdTech, I know Chairman Gordo's on the line, our home ownership opportunity program. I had a few questions about it. I talked to the mayor over the weekend, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to bring that program back to the EdTech committee to have a brief discussion on how the financing works.
We'll ask the city manager to work with Mr. Dykstra to bring that forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, any more comments on 15? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Councilmember McAustin, second. Anybody second? Vice Mayor, thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes?
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you. We'll move to item 17. Councilmember Madison.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm prepared to move the item, but I wanted to first just acknowledge that we did make, the staff recommendation makes this action retroactive to July 1. This is the agreement with the firefighters, which is essentially a placeholder. And I just wanted to inquire of staff, I take it that we will also make whatever agreement we ultimately enter into retroactive to July 1 as well?
Councilmember Madison, I think that is to be determined based on negotiations with the bargaining unit and direction from the council.
Well, this is not the typical situation of negotiations, bogging down and then, fingers are pointed in both directions as to the reasons for that. As the staff report states, the COVID pandemic was the reason that these discussions were essentially tabled. And I think that's the spirit behind the retroactivity to July 1 of the, albeit minimal, adjustment we're making in this report. So I'll just move the item, but I would like it in this in terms of the appropriateness of and the difference here, because this is a 90-day extension basically because of the impact on our public safety employees of COVID. So I'd move the item, Mayor.
Second.
The second by Councilmember Kennedy. Mr. Gordo?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure it's clear. There are no cost of living adjustments or raises other than paramedic classification that's receiving a very minimal increase for $100 per month to get to bring him up to market, correct?
That's correct. Hi, council members. Jennifer Curtis, HR Director. The only change for PFFA is what you just said, the $100 a month increase to paramedic pay, only for the firefighter rank.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that. It's important to highlight that, our firefighters recognizing that this is a very difficult time for the city, budgetarily, have extended their contract essentially with no pay raises, doing the right thing for the right reason. We focused on this extension simply on non-economic factors, which again, I think was the right thing to do on the part of our workforce and for the right reasons. And so I think that should be recognized by the council and by the community. And so I just wanted to highlight both of those points.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Clerk will read the roll.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson? That was a yes, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
All right, we'll move now to item 18, which comes from the Finance Committee. And we'll wait for.
I don't need a presentation. I think I asked for this one. I simply wanted to inquire about measures on these issues. I apologize. Let me just fix my notes. Questions. I received some comments about questions about how many people do we anticipate will be helped by these dollars, and then performance measures included in the expenditure of these dollars. And if staff could just respond to both of those issues.
Councilmember Gordo, with us in the chamber is Diane Russell Carter from the Workforce Development Board, and I'll turn it over to her to respond to your questions.
Good afternoon.
Good.
Okay, for the projects that we submitted, request for approval. The first one is for the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act Program Youth, $501,323 over a 27-month period, and that will serve 75 youth. Then we have the COVID-19 Employment Recovery National Dislocated Worker Grant Funds, $525,000, and that will serve 150. Then we have the Additional Assistance Underserved COVID-19 Impacted Individual Grant, $450,000 over a 7-month period. That will serve 500 people. The Regional Planning Implementation Grant funds in the amount of $400,000 is a grant that is primarily used for regional planning. There is a small amount of money there available to each of the local workforce development boards in LA County for their support services. So there is no real number of individuals attached to that. We have a limit, and we do, in certain circumstances, we can go over the limit of about $1,000 per individual. So if we apply that, that would be 23 people. And then let's see. Okay, the next is the increase in the contract amount for South Bay Workforce Development Board. That is so based on the additional money that we've received, we can have the contract extended to write individual training vouchers for that amount of money. And okay, I think that's it for the programs. And then as far as the performance, we are in line for the performance. We have 7 performance goals, and at this point, last year, we are right now negotiating our new performance goals. We did meet last year's goals, and the performance goals range around 65, 68%. We are in line for a high performing board because we did meet the state's criteria on performance and program operation.
And I think it's important to point out that these are grant dollars that we're programming, receiving and programming, accepting, receiving, and programming for the purpose of assisting people through the crisis, correct?
Correct.
And so if somebody wanted to find the performance measures and goals, Diane, where would they find them?
You can find them
in your website?
For each individual one. You'll
In
be able
general,
to find it on State of California Employment Development Department in their information notices.
And do we have a
It'll
link?
be online.
Okay, do we have a link from our city's website or from your shop?
I believe there is a link, but I can send one. I can send the link.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. There's a motion by Councilmember Gordo. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Masuda. Clerk, please read the roll.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. We'll move now to item 19. Councilmember Wilson had questions about this.
Yeah, when I read, I'm not on the finance committee, but when I read the staff report, I'm I don't call it allegations, but the assessment of what is happening at CalPERS was concerning. So I wanted to learn more about what the Finance Committee was identifying so we all could be aware of those concerns, given the significant impact that CalPERS has on the operating budget of the city and the general fund. So I would ask that we maybe be educated a little bit on this topic.
Beyond the staff report, you want a presentation on the staff report, Andy?
If there is one, I mean, I read the staff report.
The staff report is very thorough and detailed. It
very-
outlines what we thought at the Finance Committee represented the CalPERS decision, largely done in closed session, to take on substantial amount of additional risk, which ultimately, could, as you point out, could have an impact on us. We were extremely concerned about both the process and the conclusions about the new investment strategy that CalPERS was identifying, and felt that it was important to shine a light on it and generate correspondence and try to also alert other cities about the potential impacts of this on our future contributions. And that's really what this is about.
In my understanding is that they're, once again, not having the benefit of the conversation, that they are undertaking investments in some riskier asset classes, including increasing exposure to private equity.
Yeah, I mean, they are taking on a higher risk profile, and we all recognize that there's this balance between risk and return, and they're under pressure to generate higher returns, and so they're talking about altering their investment portfolio profile. But beyond that, I think what really got our attention was the fact that they are going to be borrowing money to make additional investment. I mean, basically leveraging funding to increase the amount of investment with the hope that they'll make an arbitrage benefit, an arbitrage profit using borrowed money, which is great if they're successful and not so great if they guess wrong or if they bet wrong. And I think, Steve, it would be helpful to update us all in terms of what impact just this initial conversation and discussion in public has been.
Well, sure. Thank you, Mayor. And Matt Hawksworth is with me, and he can add more to the conversation. I think, Matt, you're able to report on the recent investment earnings that CalPERS posted as well. So let me just mention this. There was pretty robust discussion at the Finance Committee. As the mayor indicates, there was concern on the part of first Mr. Hawksworth and myself, and then the committee as a whole, about some changes that CalPERS is making, putting more money into private equity, and then this notion of borrowing up to $80 billion to leverage more assets to try to get a return. So we've had actually quite a lot of response. I've been contacted by a number of other city managers and other professionals in this space. And then last week, Matt and I were contacted by CalPERS, and they want to have a talk with us. So we're setting that up as well. But I think it'd be helpful if I turned it over to Matt so he could share a little bit more. This is an area of concern, and it's good to hear that others share the concern. Matt?
Yes, thank you. So yes, as both the mayor and the city manager had mentioned, we've been watching CalPERS closely. Some data points that have come up in the last week. On the 15th, CalPERS did release their performance return for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. Their preliminary return is at 4.7%. Their target is 7%. So they finished well short, but they did make a remarkable recovery since March, when they were down far more than that. And then they're hosting a webinar tomorrow to kind of walk through what's going on. They're supposed to be discussing these two items, which they're calling more and better assets, which is outlined in the staff report. So I and other staff will participate in that. And then as Steve, the city manager mentioned, CalPERS also reached out to us to have a conversation. But I think this is the very beginning of watching them closely. Since that time, we've been made aware of some legislation that's being proposed that could give CalPERS more coverage in terms of the private credit. They're proposing to issue loans, private loans to private businesses, and they're asking for legislation which would give them greater cover to not disclose who they're giving the money to or the terms of the money. So there's a lot of moving parts going on with CalPERS and different things they're taking on. The most important part, I think, to highlight though, is they're a third-party financial advisor that reviews their strategic plan and their investment plan. Most recently stated that their long-term target return, this third-party advisor believes that they will earn 5.7%, and CalPERS target is 7%. So they need to take on investments that have the potential to earn more money. And there's no such thing as an investment with no risk that's going to earn more money. So in order to bridge that gap between 5.9% and 7%, they're going to have to take on more risk. And that's what they're doing.
Well, I appreciate the additional exposition. It's obviously the consequences of how this plays out could have profound impacts to the city. And I appreciate the Finance Committee, informing us and informing the public, because if things don't work out, we're all stuck with increased CalPERS premiums, and that puts obviously tremendous burden on the general fund. So there's other things we could be doing or should be doing. I would ask my colleagues on the Finance Committee to let us know, and certainly I would support whatever actions they would recommend.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Gordo?
Yeah, this arbitrage approach, taking on debt to invest the proceeds of the debt in hopes of making a profit, is just it's so risky and foolhardy. And then at the end of the day, it's the member cities, including Pasadena, that will be left holding the bag if it doesn't work. And have we? I mean, I'm aware of a number of pension systems considering a similar approach and ultimately rejecting it because it's just too risky an approach. Have we looked to see what other pension systems have looked at this and rejected it, so that we can share that with the other cities and share it with CalPERS as an example of why we are concerned about it?
Yeah, the CalPERS board met last week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and on Monday, they took up an informational item to discuss this, and their third-party advisor, Wilshire, had this exact discussion, and State Controller Yee, who sits on their board, asked that specific question. Are other pension funds already doing this, or are they looking at it? And the response was essentially, no, other pension funds are not doing this. But yes, other pension funds will probably start looking at this because they also cannot achieve their long-term goals.
Well, I'm aware of at least a handful, including some of the counties and cities that have their own pension fund that have considered this and rejected it. And so it might be helpful for staff to have that information in hand, since it appears that the response to the state controller maybe wasn't as accurate as it should be. And, we may have to do some of the due diligence ourselves and share that information with others.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Councilmember Wilson, for raising this for the rest of the council and the public. I mean, this is in the category of be careful what you wish for, right? Because if CalPERS decides that the risk, in fact, is too great and that they can't achieve their 7% rate that they've projected, then they drop their rate and they send us a bill, right? And it's really, this is not a happy place to be. and for any of us. But I think we're right to flag. I mean, as much as we'd like to see them earn a more robust return because it works to our benefit, if the risk is too great and things go wrong, we really are left holding the bag, and we just can't have that. So I think it's a useful public discussion. We'll be interested in hearing the outcome of your conversation with CalPERS. So is there a motion to adopt item 19?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McCaustin. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you. That completes the consent. Mark, were there other public comments on the consent calendar, or did you get them?
I got everything for the consent calendar.
So we'll move now to item 23, public hearing on the approval of the HUD submittal with regard to analysis of.
Mayor, this is the time and place for the public hearing on approval and authorization of the submittal to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD of the 2020 analysis of impediments to fair housing choice report. On July 16, 2020, the public hearing notice was published in the Pasadena Journal. The city clerk's office did not receive any correspondence regarding this item.
Thank you. Mr. Wong?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The analysis of impediments to fair housing choice report is a required report of all jurisdictions that receive entitlement dollars from HUD. We're required to produce this report about every 5 to 7 years. So I'll turn it over to Randy Mabson, who can give a brief overview of the specific impediments that apply to Pasadena and the recommendations that the consultant came up with.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor.
1 second, let him, he's going to post the PowerPoint. 1 second. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Pasadena residents. This presentation is for the 2020 Analysis of Impediments for Fair Housing Choice Report, also known as the AI report. My name is Randy Mabson, Program Coordinator for the Housing Department. Is there a clicker? Here. One might ask, what is the AI? In this case, it doesn't stand for artificial intelligence. The Analysis of Impediments report is required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, in order to continue receiving entitlements like Community Development Block Grants, Home Investment Partnership Act, and other federal funding. These programs must be administered to affirmatively further fair housing, which means that the city must conduct an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, take actions to overcome impediments, and maintain records on analysis and actions. Fair housing describes a condition in which individuals of similar income levels in the same housing market have a like range of choice available to them regardless of their protected class status. It prohibits discrimination in housing choice because of protected class statuses. What is protected class status? At the federal level, protected classes include race, color, national origin, disability, religion, sex, and family statuses. The state of California takes those protected classes even further, covering marital status, ancestry, sexual orientation, age, gender identity, citizenship, primary language, immigration status, and more recently, the source of income, including Section 8. That means a landlord cannot refuse to rent a unit to you because you have a Section 8 housing choice voucher. The AI report analyzes the city of Pasadena using data based on the American Community Survey, ACS. It estimates from estimates collected from the US Census, in addition to an array of public information published by the state, private sector, and local agency. The AI looks at demographic and housing characteristics, practices in the housing market, patterns and trends of housing discrimination, public policies and regulations regarding housing choice, lending practices for home mortgages, and the report identifies impediments found from the analysis and provides recommendations to address each impediment. Overall, the city has performed well in affirmatively furthering fair housing choice. The AI report is conducted every 5 to 7 years. Much progress has been made on the 11 impediments found in the previous 2013 AI report. The 2020 AI report found 6 impediments that need to be addressed by the city. Details of each identified impediment can be viewed in the 2020 AI draft at the Housing Department website, cityofpasadena.net/housing. For this presentation, we will review only noted recommendations for each. Impediment 1, land use and zoning. The AI recommends that the city amend the city's housing code to be consistent with the zoning code regarding the definition of family. It also recommends amending the zoning code to address the following: low barrier navigation center, supportive housing, emergency and transitional housing, density bonus, 100% affordable housing, and accessory dwelling units. All of these are bills that have been passed by the state and assembly. Impediment number 2, development standards. The AI recommends, pursuant to SB 330, evaluate the city's development and design standards to ensure objective standards are established. Provide outreach and education to developers, contractors, architects, and business owners with information on how to incorporate sustainability in project design. Continue to provide options to reduce parking as an incentive for development of affordable special needs and transit-oriented housing. Continue to implement the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program. Continue to facilitate and encourage the broadest range of housing types. Impediment 5, housing accessibility. The AI recommends that the city continue to provide options to reduce parking as an incentive for development. And you may see a couple of these recommendations repeated. For number 5, it also asks that the city continue to promote units listing by landlords on PasadenaHousingSearch.com. Implement the reasonable accommodation ordinance. Work with Housing Rights Center to conduct educational outreach to landlords regarding disability and fair housing. Amend the zoning code to address the following assembly bills: supportive housing and emergency and transitional housing. Impediment 6, racial concentration and linguistic isolation. The AI recommends that the city continue to require affirmative marketing of available affordable housing, especially for inclusionary housing units and affordable housing projects that receive city funding or incentives. City should continue to expand its housing stock to accommodate a range of housing options and income levels. City should continue bilingual efforts and strive for expanding the number of languages offered. And information on housing services and programs should be made available in multiple languages to the extent feasible. Impediment number 7, fair housing outreach. The AI recommends that the city publicize fair housing events and program information more prominently on the city website and at public locations. Expand methods of outreach and education, especially through social media. Publicize fair housing lawsuits and complaints promoting positive outcomes and resolutions, and update the 2013-2021 housing element to comply with the new housing element requirement, affirmatively furthering fair housing, AB Bill 686. which is incorporating the findings of this AI in the housing element and also include a program to address fair housing issues identified. Impediment number 9, access to financing. The AI recommends that we periodically monitor mortgage lending data to identify potential issues with fair lending. And number 10, persons with disabilities. The AI recommends that we amend the zoning code to address the following: AB bills, and also work with fair housing service providers to educate landlords and tenants on the reasonable accommodations process. For each recommendation, an agency is identified to take proper action. It is anticipated that most of the recommendations may take some time to implement, while others are ongoing activities. However, some recommendations can be addressed in the near term, including modifying the definition of family in the city's housing code and revising the land use classification of emergency shelter in the city's zoning code. The Housing and Planning and Community Development departments will collaborate on a plan and timeline to implement the recommendations. In addition, the Housing Department works closely to promote workshops and seminars provided by the Housing Rights Center in their efforts to provide landlord and tenant services. Before I conclude this public service announcement, that if you are experiencing what you feel to be housing discrimination that violates protected classes, please visit or call the Housing Rights Center. They have an office at the Jackie Robinson Community Center and over on 1015 North Lake, Suite 101. Given the times, you may want to call the hotline at 626-831-9732, which is specifically for Pasadena residents. Calls to that number go immediately to the Pasadena Lake office, where housing rights staff work 5 days a week. Calls are usually returned on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Remember that this fair housing agency is for the entire county, not just Pasadena. Please give them time to respond, as I'm sure they are quite overwhelmed given the current rental moratorium environment. This concludes the presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
Our consultant, Veronica Tam, who put together the analysis of impediments report, is also available, and she should be connected to the meeting. Thank you. Have questions on the specific report?
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Randy. Councilmember Kennedy.
So for me, the question becomes, what changes every year? And it's not a question necessarily for staff, because I've been on the council for, I think, around 6, maybe 7 years. And there are others on the council who've been on more than 20 years. And I know that certain of my colleagues are more demonstrable in their support for increasing the housing stock for the very low and low income. But what we often get in the city of Pasadena is more moderate housing. We are now going to have, as we have since I've been on the council, significant development in District 3 to seek to address the housing crisis. And so if staff could share with me and stay with me just for a moment, what are the income requirements for, and is there a category for very, very low, and low income related to qualifying if such units existed in the city of Pasadena?
Yes, Councilmember Kennedy, the city does have a significant amount of low and very low income deed restricted housing, and increasingly more and more extremely low income housing. So low income is typically below 80% of area median income. Very low is typically at
when you talk in terms of median income, what would be better for the viewer is to understand dollars or income, the actual range of income. And is it possible for you to articulate that as opposed to how you just articulated it?
Page 42. There's a table that lists every number that we need. and that needs to be made available because John's exactly right. People never understand 80% or 150% or any of that, but there is a table on page 44.
I'm going somewhere with this, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Please.
Yes, so there is a table, as the mayor mentioned, table 28 on page 44, that mentions the income levels.
Three categories.
Yes.
And I think I was incorrect in how I articulated the very low. I called it very, very low, extremely low. So those are the three areas that I'm referencing.
Yeah, here in this particular table, the terms are a little bit different, but at 80% area median income and below for a household size of which household size? Are you for a household of 4? Because it varies depending on the size of the household.
I think for what I would like to achieve in the city of Pasadena, Bill, we'll start with a household of 4 to 6. So do you have 4 and 6?
We have 4 and 5 on the table.
That'll be fine.
Okay, for at 80% and below, for household of 4, it's 83,500. For household of 5, it's 90,200. For 50% AMI to 31% AMI, household of 4 is 52,000. Household size of 5 is 56,400. And for 30% and below, the extremely low income category, for a household of 4, it's 31,300. And for a household of 5, it's 33,850.
Okay, so what I think would change the calculus of what we engage in every year in having these discussions is to make a policy statement at the council level and back that up with the creativity of finding the financing or partial financing to achieve the policy statement. And the policy statement is this, in my view, that could be incorporated in these annual reports. That the Pasadena City Council, by the power invested in it, by the voters of the city, have committed to building in conjunction with private developers, nonprofits, 1,000 very low or extremely low housing units to meet the most difficult need in the city of Pasadena. If we do that, I would suggest to my colleagues, more to staff, that we will meet it. And if we put a time frame of 3 years on it and incorporate that within these documents, I believe we'll come up with the creativity to meet that. Obviously, I don't think the city of Pasadena could do it alone, but certainly if it's a policy objective that the council adopts, we can attract the right people to meet the goal. And for me, the most difficult housing stock to build is for the extremely low income. And I think it would further the council's already stated goals, adopted goals, if in fact we pushed hard as a council and unanimously agreed to building 1,000 of these units within a 3-year time period. And certainly I believe it would have an appreciable impact on the 500 plus residents of our community who are termed homeless, without a house, without a place to call home. And it would be unprecedented if we do that. And I think we would in fact meet the goal. I'm not suggesting that we adopt it now, but I hope there would be an opportunity, Mayor, for us to put that on a table for discussion as a policy objective that I've asked for. And that is the building of a 1,000 units of extremely low and very low income units to meet the needs of our community. Particularly if we keep going as we are going, there'll be more and more dearth of low income people in the city of Pasadena. And the demand is extremely high. And I'm not talking about new residents. I'm talking about residents who grew up in the city of Pasadena, who've been a part of this community for either 20, 30, or 40 plus years. So I'm not sure how you would want to handle that, Mayor, but certainly I think it's worthy for us at an appropriate time to have a discussion about it, so the calculus would be different from year to year. And certainly I applaud staff, Bill Wong, Jim Wong, and all of the folks who work in our housing department. But we've got to do something different than what we've done in the past. And I also want to applaud Jim Osterling and his group, who are building 200 units of single room occupancy basically in my district to meet that need. But the need is exponential. We've got to do something different. That's my comment. And I hope it'll garner the support of the mayor in agendizing an appropriate discussion at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Other comments and questions on the document?
Is that, Mayor, is that you'd like to respond later?
Well, I want to respond later because I think I want to talk with staff. I think that what you've described is exactly in the framework of the housing element, and I want to understand when we're goal setting on the RENA numbers and on the housing element. That's the time to plug that in. So I'm not ignoring it. I'm just not sure when that is. I need to get some more information.
Just as long as it takes place with your support, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm curious how that would be different than the discussions we have around RENA, housing goals, or housing element, housing plan. I'm just not sure how. Aren't those all policies?
If you're asking me the question, Mr. Gordo, how I envision it is that there's an extra step to the goal that we adopt as a council as a policy objective. I'm not suggesting that the RENA numbers or other instruments or hopes that are expressed are not important. The key here is that we will be tasked with figuring out financially how to meet that goal within 3 years. That's what I'm suggesting, and finding the dollars to do that. As you know, the council has been reluctant in appointing any kind of housing commission to deal with the very issues that I'm talking about. Given that is the case, it must be the council that digs down deep. You, particularly, and Madison as longtime members of the council, in helping us find the resources that we can add with external resources to get it done. But we haven't really adopted that as a policy objective. And we certainly don't have the money just lying around, but we have the creative brain trust in the city of Pasadena to figure this out.
Okay. Questions for staff on the study, the analysis of housing impediments and the recommendations that are contained within? Do we have public comment, Mr. Clerk?
No, Mayor, not on this item.
I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We'll have a vote on that, Mr. Clerk.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hampton, or Vice Mayor Hampton, sorry. I think we're having technical difficulties with Mr. Hampton. Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
I'd move approval, or if that's the correct way in which we're handling it, for the 2020-24 consolidated plan and the 2020. What is that?
That's Vice Mayor Hampton's connection is having some issues.
Okay, 2020 and 2021 annual action plan?
No. We're on the 2020 analysis of impediments,
Oh, I'm sorry,
item 23.
I'm sorry. Move approval on agenda item number 23, that we find 1, 2, and 3.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember McAustin. Any further comments or questions on the impediments? All right, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton, were you able to participate? No. All right, Mr. Hampton left the meeting. We'll get him back. Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
That's 7 in favor. Motion is approved.
All right, thank you. We will now move to the next public hearing with regard to the 5-year consolidated plan. Mr. Clerk.
This is the time and place for the public hearing on the approval of the 5-year consolidated plan 2020 to 2024, the annual action plan 2020 to 2021, and related funding applications for the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership Act, and Emergency Solutions Grant programs. On July 16, 2020, the public hearing notice was published in the Pasadena Journal. No correspondence was received by the city clerk's office regarding this item.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We have a presentation, a staff presentation.
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. Before Randy provides a presentation, just wanted to provide the context that this is a required 5-year plan for community development block grant dollars, we call home dollars, called Home Investment Partnership Act dollars, and Emergency Solutions Grant program, which is one of our homeless funding sources. And so there's a requirement every year for entitlement jurisdictions to prepare a 5-year plan. That's what we have today, as well as individual single-year plans. And so we also include the annual plan for the 2020, 2021 program years. So it does both. It's a 5-year plan and then also the 1-year plan for the first year with respect to specifically these three funding sources. So I'll turn it over to Randy Mapson to give us a quick presentation.
Good afternoon again, Mayor, Council, Pasadena residents. As was said, this presentation is for the 5-year consolidated plan, which covers programs years 2020 through 2024. HUD requires that the city submit one of these plans every 5 years. We are also asking for approval to submit the 2020-21 annual action plan as an application to HUD for funding under the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership Act, and the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. My name is Randy Mapson, Program Coordinator for the Housing Department. As a recipient for entitlement funding, the city is required to submit a consolidated plan, also known as the CON plan, to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. The 5-year consolidated plan is a comprehensive planning document that addresses both long and short-term strategies to meet housing and community development needs. There are 5 components utilized to develop the CON plan. First is the citizen participation, the needs assessment, market analysis, strategic plan, and then the actual annual action plan. We will briefly explore the contribution of each to the CON plan. Citizen participation. A community needs survey was conducted in September 2019 to obtain input from residents on what they think are the highest community priorities and the most needed community development activities. Residents were asked to rank 4 community priorities: create more affordable housing available to low-income residents was ranked number 1, followed by an improvement to city infrastructure, Third was improve facilities, providing public and community service. And fourth was to create more jobs available to low-income residents. Residents were also asked to pick on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 indicating the lowest community need and 5 being the highest community need, 52 eligible community development activities. This table shows the top 10 community needs from the survey. As you can see, there is a broad range of the activities provided. Number 1 was the services to abused and neglected children, which is a public service. As far as facility improvements, the community believes that homeless facilities is a much needed community service, number 5. And it ranges from increasing affordable housing, services to victims of domestic violence, street improvements, and youth services. A list of the top 10 results for each need category can be viewed in Appendix B of the CON plan, which is also available to be viewed at the Housing Department website, cityofpasadena.net/housing. The needs assessment provides information on the needs of housing, homelessness, special needs, including disabled and seniors, and facilities of the city of Pasadena, from data collected from the ACS 5-year estimates, the point-in-time homeless count, and the 2020 AI report, and a variety of local sources. The following data stood out from the needs assessment. In the housing needs section, data showed that almost 40% of Pasadena households earn less than 80% area median income, also known as AMI. 16% earn less than 30% AMI. Over 80% of households that earn less than 30% AMI experience at least one severe housing problem. A severe housing problem is when there is a severe cost burden, living in substandard housing, or living in a severely overcrowded unit. In the section under disproportionately greater need housing problem, data shows that Hispanic households earning less than 30% AMI experience housing problems at a 10.9% higher rate than the jurisdiction overall. African American households earning between 80% and 100% AMI experience housing problems at a 24% higher rate than the jurisdiction overall. The market analysis dissects the housing stock and community assets of the city. Here's some data that concluded from the market analysis. In the section under housing market analysis, data shows that over 10,000 Pasadena households that earn less than 50% AMI cannot afford housing. Under the cost of housing section, a study was done to show the median rent for Pasadena. A studio runs for $1,750 as median rent. For 1 bedroom is $1,895. 2 bedrooms, median is $2,370, and for a 3-bedroom, $2,400 with the median. Under number of housing units, 15 affordable housing projects currently in the pipeline will bring 755 units to Pasadena over the next 5 years. 7 projects in Northwest Pasadena covering districts 1 and 3, 3 projects in Southwest Pasadena covering District 6, 4 projects scattered throughout Central Pasadena covering District 2 and 5, and then 1 project in East Pasadena for District 4. The strategic plan is a long-term strategy to meet priority needs of the community based on information collected from the needs assessment and the housing market analysis. Anticipated allocation for the next 5 years, we expect to receive over $16 million. Of course, this all depends on Congress and their budget approvals. Our CDBG and ESG allocations have grown 17% in the last 4 years. We anticipate a 3% increase annually. Home has grown, but also is a known project to be on the chopping block in Congress. We are anticipating a 1% increase. HUD uses a formula based on the census tract data on how many low and moderate income persons live in the city. And that formula determines the allocation that the city receives. So another reason why it's important to complete your 2020 census count. Part of the strategic plan is to provide accomplishment goals for the next 5 years. We plan to spend over $6 million for housing, just over $1.6 million for public services, $775,000 for homeless intervention and prevention, $1 million for public facilities, and $2.5 million for infrastructure projects, and $425,000 for economic development. The annual action plan describes the specific projects and activities that the city will undertake in the coming program year. CDBG, we expect to receive just under $2.6 million this year. For ESG, just under $200,000 at $196,000. And for our home program, just barely over $1 million. Here's the year one goal summary for program year 2021, along with the accomplishment goals for that year that begun, for this year that has begun July 1, 2020. For housing, we expect to assist over 6 houses through our tenant-based rental assistance program. 13 housing units are expected to be rehabilitated. Our public services expect to serve 250 persons. Homeless intervention and prevention, we are expecting to assist 250 persons through overnight shelters and 40 persons through homeless prevention. Our infrastructure improvements will assist over 15,000 persons. And our economic development goal is to assist 40 micro enterprises. Here's a list of all the CDBG projects to be funded this year. You'll see it says number 2 there twice, but it's number 3 for finance department. We have our repayment of $440,000 that we do every year for our Section 108 repayment for the $6 million loan that we took out to renovate the Robinson Park Recreation Center. We have a few new public services from Armenian Relief Society, YWCA San Gabriel Valley, and then our urgent need that we are categorizing under our emergency business grant program. We are allocating $425,000 for that. For the emergency solutions grant program, these are our 5 projects. We'll highlight the one with the Friends Indeed, the Brad Weather Shelter, which is a weather activated shelter for overnight homeless persons that need shelter. For our home program, we have these 4 projects. Number 3, you'll see is the Housing Department Home Efficiency Loan Program, which has been rebranded as the HELP program. This is our single family rehab program. And then we also have our tenant-based rental assistance program that we're allocating $200,000 that we're going to assist Pasadena residents that are on the Section 8 program and also overhoused persons living in affordable housing. In total, for the program year, we expect to fund $3,798,116. This concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Randy. Questions for Mr. Mapson? Mr. Kennedy?
Yes. Thank you, Randy. There was emergency needs. Can you go back to the slide that reflected the emergency needs? I think it was 425,000 or thereabouts.
Yeah, it just takes a second for them to get it back up. Hold on one second.
Not a problem.
If I may chime in here, Councilmember Kennedy, the $425,000 is anticipated as a micro business loan program, a grant program for those that have been COVID affected. So we've been working with our Economic Development Division on designing that particular program. But the funding source
Excellent.
would be out of CDBG.
Excellent, because I had recently was interviewed about this area, and I was thinking about microloans as a way of energizing our community, particularly those who have been affected by COVID. So that's a smart move, and that does answer my question as to what those funds would be used for. Then, as it relates to the slide that articulated what Latinos and African Americans specifically are dealing with, those difficulties related to being able to afford a unit. I'd like to go back to that slide if we can. Okay, so Hispanic households earning less than 30% of the area median income experience housing problems at a 10.9% the jurisdiction overall. And define the jurisdiction. Is the jurisdiction only Pasadena, or does it include the county?
It is only Pasadena.
Okay, thank you. And then that's surprising, one, but what is more troubling is that with African Americans, the problem is almost more than double than that of Latinos in terms of difficulty in terms of the housing need and not being able to find a unit that they can afford. And so, again, is there some targeted outreach, training, but in every aspect almost of society. And so unless we have these honest discussions about decisions that have had a devastating impact on, example, the African American community, and then subsequently the Latino community, it's not an honest discussion. It's not a way for us to look at whatever the foundation is, the platform is, and then resolve or come up with solutions. So we have to have that. And so to that point, in terms of SB 481 that essentially took 40 or 50 million dollars over the past 20 years from our low and moderate income housing trust funds, how do we make up for that from a policy perspective, moving towards actually finding dollars in addition to dollars that we've already spent dealing with this and seemingly intractable issue? But it's not so intractable in my view that smart minds in Pasadena can't figure it out. But race continues to be a factor and one that debilitates certain ethnic groups in this community. And so we, at some point, need to further the discussion about race and its devastating impacts on every aspect of society in the city of Pasadena. And what I believe you'll find is it's been significant, it's been pernicious, and we as a council and subsequent councils have a moral and possibly legal obligation to fix it. It's just as simple as that. And these small measures are good, but we've got to do something that's more comprehensive to deal with the issue, because prior policy decisions have devastated the Black community. There's no doubt about it.
Make sure that I'm understanding this right. I mean, John points out that the housing difficulty percentage is 2x for African Americans, but I think probably the more be a lot more intentful in trying to remedy that.
Well, having said that, Andy, I think Bill, Councilmember Wilson's comments are extremely insightful and not what I was thinking. There is a way for you to share those numbers or that percentage, and I would be interested in knowing, piggybacking on what the council member has already said, what the actual percentage or number is.
I would echo that. I'd be very interested in what that table looks like.
We can find that information. We can send that to you or send it out to the city manager.
Is there a way in which?
So you don't have that information now? Because I'm glad that, I'm so sorry, Councilmember Kennedy and Councilmember Wilson. That's the exact question I was gonna say. I said, on slide 5, I had it snowed down. On slide 5, it's not an apples for apples comparison, so I don't really understand the purpose of putting that there.
On page, what one you?
You'll find in the con plan, it'll have actual numbers to exactly what the councilman.
Just direct us to a
page. You could just tell us the number as well.
Well, there's a lot of different tables depending on what income group you're looking at, and they're all listed on page 20 of the con plan, and it goes through each AMI income bracket and shows the actual numbers for each race or ethnicity, and then it also breaks it down by income category.
May I just ask a simple question? What was in looking or reviewing Councilmember Wilson's questions and comments, why was there the distinction? Why aren't we comparing when we look at Latinos or Hispanic households and African American households? Why are in this slide? Why are we not?
These are just highlights from these specific sections of the comp plan. This is not to be compared against either one. It is to highlight the data that stood out from these sections. So for the people earning 30% AMI, the data stood out as a disproportionately greater need for Hispanic households. For income brackets from 80 to 100% AMI, the data stood out as a disproportionate greater need from African American households. And there's not a comparison between those two, just highlighting the information from both.
With Councilmember Wilson's assessment that if we were using the same percentages that were used with Hispanic households, that 24% higher rate would be even greater?
No, the African American households, the Hispanic households for that same income bracket between 80 and 100% AMI was lower. So there was no disproportionate need. So this is only highlighting the ones that are disproportionate needs for those income brackets.
I don't understand. And Bill seemed to intimate, Mr. Wong seemed to intimate at the initial onset of answering the questions that Councilmember Wilson raised, that it would be significantly in the slide. Is that not accurate?
Mr. Councilmember, that could be accurate. Give us an opportunity to study. There's so many tables in this report, but give it a chance to be the same statistic for African American households at 30% AMI that are experiencing housing problems.
Okay, so I think Mayor, if there's an opportunity for us to have another public forum to discuss this, I think that would be more effective, because sometimes when we receive information through the city manager's weekly newsletter, it gets lost and we don't have a policy discussion about these issues. So if there's a way in which we could have that would meet some of the concerns that the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Wilson have raised, I'd hope that we would do it sooner rather than later, since this is such a intractable problem.
And,
Okay.
and Mayor and Councilmember Kennedy, irrespective of having a separate discussion about housing policy, I would just point out in the document, which is available online for the public to see, the bullet points on slide 5 are extracts from the tables on page 27 through 29 in the attachment. So if anyone wanted to see the full data set, they can see that on pages 27, 28, and 29.
Thank you.
And also, John, just eyeballing it, and I found the tables and they are in here. It's a little bit hard to locate. About a third of Hispanic households with AMI of 80 to 100% face housing problems. Interestingly enough, in the lower income, once again, just doing this eyeballing this at a high level, only 10% for Blacks and African Americans, so actually on par with Hispanics, which is not what my guess would be. I think if your AMI was lower, that you would have more housing problems, but the pattern seems to be consistent for both Hispanics and Blacks. That at a higher income level, they have more housing problems, which I'm not quite sure how to explain that.
It may be because there are fewer subsidies and assistance available for higher income brackets.
Thank you.
We just garnered that off of page 28.
27.
Yeah.
And then 29.
Mayor, I just think that there needs to be a way in which we can have a fuller discussion. There are questions that can be available in terms of answers, even though the answers may be here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We'll revisit this.
I had a question as well.
There.
I was unfortunately, my internet was acting really wacko for a while, so I was unable to participate in the last discussion as around the financing, discriminatory practices, as well as the race. Sorry. And so in this proposal here on that slide 5, it mentions, thank you, sorry. Can you go back to slide 5?
Sorry, we had taken down the PowerPoint because it's a little easier to communicate, but we'll put it back right up. Just give us a second.
Okay. I appreciated Bill Wong's presentation, and as well as Randy, thank you for the presentation. Thank you guys for being so thorough and diligent when it comes to these matters. One of the comments made by Bill Wong was the marketing for the Heritage Housing Project that's within my district boundaries. And yes, there will be a significant amount of more African Americans and Latinos applying for those locations. But one of the reasons is because, and I mean, I was at each and every one of those outreaches. I've reached out to lots of those families personally. I encourage them to continue with the effort, even if the bank is not calling them back. And so when those type of things happen, when the bank is not calling these people back, or they're not trying to loan to them when they should be giving them loans, who's there to help from the city side? Because we are actually giving funding for these projects, and sometimes the bank has not responded back to the individual, and maybe the bank hasn't responded back to the individual because they're so busy, or maybe they just haven't responded back because that individual happens to be Black. I don't know exactly why they're not responding back, and why I have to engage personally with the bank for them to respond back to individuals. This is not new. This is something that happens on a lot of the projects, especially when it comes to home ownership in the city of Pasadena. And so I want to know who I can rely on, so that, or who the resident can rely on, or whoever's applying for these homes. Who can they rely on to talk to about a bank not calling them back, or, Bill, do you have a?
Right. Yes, Mr. Councilman, and thank you for your involvement in both the marketing and some of these specific households that are having difficulty. We're having difficulty. So the first line of assistance is with the developer, who is motivated to get these units sold, and the lender, typically the developer's lender, is the lender that the home buyers would utilize. And then the second line of assistance would be my department, Jim Wong, and myself, Bill Wong. And we did, I think it was kind of a all hands on deck kind of approach when it wasn't clear that one prospective buyer was getting underwritten in a proper way. And so we did make some calls, not to change any decision at the particular case, and making sure they were considering all the information and even um, exceptions that are allowable under the pandemic. And my recollection is that that particular household actually did end up getting
with their council member, for their council member to get in contact with the housing department and to get in contact with you, Randy or Bill. So I want to know, is there a point of reference when these presentations that are happening by HHP and any other organization that this, maybe there's a city representative. From all of those, the ones I went to, there wasn't a city representative besides myself at the actual meetings or a point of contact from your department that is going to follow up with the banks, because like I said, not everyone knows to reach out to the mayor, the city council members, to reach out to the bank or to reach out to the housing department.
Yeah, I would say that the point of contact on the city who oversees our new affordable housing development, including the homeownership units.
So maybe when those programs are going out and the presentation is happening, there should be a slide for everyone that is in those rooms. There's hundreds of people applying for housing in the city. There should be a slide with contact information, so these people know exactly who they can get in contact with.
We can do that. Usually the developer has their contact information. We can ask them to also put our contact information on that slide.
I think that's fair because, we are giving significant funding for the project to happen, and we do want people from Pasadena to apply, and we do want there to be a fair practice. And if we hear about unfair treatment of people, typically those are the ones. Greater need for housing problems, African Americans and Hispanics. So I understand that we as a council talk about how great Pasadena is because of the diversity of our city. But if you look at African Americans in our city, the percentage is constantly dropping. From owning homes or even living in the city of Pasadena. Some because they believe it's too expensive to here. Some because they believe that this city is not the city that that they grew up and raised to live in. They don't feel like they're wanted here anymore. So with that being a greater need, how do we address that outside of marketing? Is there a set aside that we're saying, okay, for this disproportionate rate of need, individuals, we will do X, Y, Z?
Yeah,
and I think that's where Councilmember Kennedy is getting as well. I think that we have to do more than saying, oh, we're just going to market to you more.
Well, we can't. We're prohibited from putting a set aside, setting aside.
I'm not saying a set aside. I'm just saying we have what we can do is, if there's a percentage of people that are leaving the city of Pasadena, we can give points to that group.
We do have a preference. HUD doesn't allow us to provide a preference for anything lower than the overall city jurisdiction. So we couldn't prioritize a certain census tract or a certain quadrant of the city.
But we could prioritize a group of, based on percentage, population, correct?
No, I don't believe so. We can target incomes. We can target incomes, but we can't target a specific race or 30% AMI, and then we can target that. We can provide a preference for those who are in the city, who live in the city and or work in the city. We can provide those preferences.
And once resided in the city or have a grandparent that once resided or was once a homeowner in the city. And I'm just thinking outside of the box at this point to try to give more points to the groups that are disproportionately in great need. Because saying that we're marketing to them is not, that's not, you know, we could market to people all we want, and we could tell them that, you know, they should apply for something, but that doesn't really mean that, you know, they have a legitimate opportunity of getting it. They're just on the same page as everybody else. But I mean, if they're disproportionately in greater need, and you're calling it out in your slide by calling it a disproportionately greater need, then that means that we need to help them greater.
Yeah, we do plan on bringing back the city's preference policy, to bring that forward to Ed Tech and probably to City Council. So when we do that, I think that'll be an opportunity to try to get as targeted as possible. We do have limits on how targeted we can be, but we do plan to do that in the near future. So that'll be an opportunity to dig into the issue.
What's the near future?
Within the next 90 days.
That's fair. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. And that was the extent of my questioning, but I am 100% with Councilmember Kennedy with having this as a deeper discussion of, you know, how can we actually help the most disproportionately greater needed population in our city.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other questions for staff? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. So moved.
Second. Mr. Gordo. Clerk, please call a roll about closing the public hearing.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McGostin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Now on the recommendation to make the CEQA finding, submit the 5-year consolidated plan, approve the CDBG program year application, the ESG Emergency Solutions Grant application, and to authorize the city manager to execute the 5-year consolidated plan, the actual and the annual action plan. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Councilmember Kennedy, seconded by Councilmember Wilson. Is there further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McGostin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson? I think that was a yes. Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you, and thank you for the discussion. We will revisit this again very soon. We'll now move to reports from council committees. From Ed Tech, we have a resolution dealing with placing a temporary cap on commissions by third-party delivery service providers. Is Mr. Dysart going to make this presentation?
Hello, Mayor Tornick, members of council. We have this report from the Ed Tech Committee. We are going to have Michelle Garrett actually make the presentation, and she's going to start that right now. Give us just one moment to queue up the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Today's staff report and presentation discusses potential efforts that the city can undertake to support local restaurants who rely on third-party delivery services to fulfill delivery orders during COVID-19. This item was previously discussed at the EdTech Committee and is being presented to the entire council for consideration. As you know, local restaurants are feeling severe pressure as a result of the governor's recent mandate to cease indoor dining operations. In order to maintain business, many of Pasadena's restaurants use services like Grubhub, DoorDash, and Postmates for the delivery of food orders. When this item was presented to EdTech, the committee asked for clarification on how this. Staff researched the question and confirmed that when fulfilling orders, third-party delivery services have two revenue streams, one from the restaurant and another from the consumer or customer. The core components that comprise the commissions and fees vary from company to company, but typically this is how it works. The fees and commissions paid by a restaurant to a third-party delivery service are usually in the ballpark of 25 to 30%. These fees paid by the restaurant include a menu fee, which represents the actual charge for food on the order that can sometimes be marked up in combination with a delivery fee, a commission fee, which represents a fee charged by the service provider to the restaurant for the use of the application and in most instances includes credit card processing. There are also pickup and takeout fees, which is paid as a commission from the restaurant to the service provider for any takeout or pickup orders placed via their mobile app. And then there's a marketing fee, which is optional and add-on fee to increase a restaurant's visibility within search listings on mobile apps. The other revenue stream comes from the consumer or the customer to the third-party delivery service. So when consumers use the service, they pay a service fee, which represents a charge by the service provider to the customer, and it captures the sale via the mobile app. It can also include other charges such as fraud protection fees when transactions occur via credit card. The consumer also pays a delivery fee, which represents the charge for having the food delivered by the service provider. There are gratuities, which are optional and earmarked for the person who delivers the food on behalf of the service provider. And then there are taxes, of course, and that's just the local sales tax on those orders. Fee structures and commission percentages vary between corporate chains and smaller independently owned restaurants who typically have less bargaining power for more competitive rates. While fees have not increased to existing restaurant customers during the pandemic, restaurants that are new to the use of third-party delivery services are likely onboarded at a higher rate than early adopters to the service. Before we move from this slide, I do want to note and highlight that the third-party commission cap being considered today only applies to the fees and commissions paid by the restaurant to the third-party delivery service. A number of cities across the country have enacted emergency food delivery caps since the start of the pandemic. In California, cities like Berkeley, Glendale, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, and Santa Cruz have all adopted temporary food delivery caps. With the exception of the cities of Glendale and Santa Cruz, which approved a flat cap of 15%, most other cities have adopted a cap of 20%, which is comprised of a 15% delivery service cap on the cost of the purchase price of an order and a 5% cap on the purchase price of an online order for all other fees charged. The County of Los Angeles will consider tomorrow at their board meeting the adoption of a third-party delivery service cap, comprised of a 15% cap on a delivery fee and a 20% cap on any combination of fees, commissions, or costs, including that delivery fee. The proposed County of LA cap has a sunset clause and requires a disclosure to the consumer of fees charged to the customer and the restaurant, as well as provisions for wage protection, including tips and gratuities paid to the drivers. Staff wanted to highlight provisions of the LA County ordinance that deals with fee limits, reporting of fees, and protection of gratuities. And on this slide, you'll find language and those provisions that were borrowed from the LA County ordinance capping delivery fees for third-party delivery platforms. We wanted to note that these provisions meet EdTech's goal of providing relief to restaurants, resolves or brings clarity to the issue of transparency of receipts, and provides protection of gratuities and tips to the drivers of the third-party delivery services. Cities and states across the United States have also enacted temporary caps on commissions charged by third-party delivery services. The lowest cap approved was from Portland, Oregon, and Cambridge, Massachusetts at 10%, with most other cities falling in the 15 to 20% range. One particular city that's not listed on this chart, Jersey City, adopted a cap of 10%, but the state of New Jersey subsequently approved a cap statewide at 20%. As part of our research, city staff conducted an anonymous survey of Pasadena restaurateurs to collect feedback on their use of third-party delivery services. The survey was available for 72 hours and was emailed out to all retail food establishments with an email address on file with the city. The survey findings are summarized on this slide. We had 66 respondents, 89% of which used third-party delivery services. In terms of average commissions, those range between 16 and 31%, and those would be the commissions that are paid from the restaurant to the third-party delivery service. Most fall within a 25 to 30% range for the delivery orders, and if a customer elects to pick up the order, then they pay a fee of 10 to 17% commission to the third-party delivery service. Of all of our respondents, 92% supported a temporary cap on commissions paid to third-party delivery. In some cases, we lose money on delivery orders. However, we cannot raise our menu prices to adjust because then our prices would be too high. We do not have the infrastructure or ability to provide our own delivery. Another respondent commented that lots of businesses on Colorado Boulevard are dependent on corporate customers who are now working remotely. As a result, we have lost 70% of normal business, and we need a cap to find new customers at affordable rates. A cap would help small restaurants who have little negotiating power, and we know that rates vary a great deal from restaurant to restaurant. Another respondent shared that after a third-party delivery service takes their commission and overhead is paid, they do not make enough of a profit. A cap is necessary for them to continue utilizing a third-party delivery service, and given current operating conditions, it's imperative that we are able to offer delivery as an option. In addition to these comments regarding a temporary cap, one restaurateur of the 66 respondents indicated that the city should not enact any regulations on third-party delivery services, while another restaurateur commented that there should be a permanent cap, not just a temporary one. In considering an approach that supports struggling restaurants while not unduly burdening third-party platforms, the following options are consistent with ordinances, resolutions, and executive orders enacted by other municipalities. You could consider a level of cap percentage. This approach would require just a straight percentage cap on all third-party delivery service fees. You could also determine which fees are subject to a cap. This approach would require a cap on delivery service fees in addition to a cap on all other service or processing fees incurred through a transaction. You could also give consideration to the length of the order. Most, if not all, of the ordinances are temporary and have sunset provisions that end when the state of local emergency ends, when dine-in restaurant service resumes, or is postdated by a set number of days following the conclusion of the stay-at-home orders. At this time, staff is recommending that the city pursue a local emergency supplement to place a temporary cap on commission fees charged by third-party delivery services to retail food establishments in Pasadena. In light of LA County's proposed ordinance, which was published in draft form following the posting of our staff report, staff recommends that we remain consistent with the County of Los Angeles so as not to create a patchwork of different caps, making it more difficult for a third-party delivery service to implement. It is therefore recommended that the council move the recommendation in the PowerPoint and direct the city manager to place a cap of all fees, commissions, or costs that total no more than 20% of the purchase price of an online order. Fees, commissions, or costs include a delivery fee. As part of the 20% cap, a delivery fee should total no more than 15% of the purchase price of an online order. In addition, staff recommends transparency requirements on receipts with disclosures of commissions, fees, or costs paid by the restaurant to the delivery service, and each fee, commission, or cost paid by the consumer to the delivery service. Finally, staff is recommending of gratuities and tips to the delivery service drivers so that their tips are not garnished when companies have to comply with this order. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Question, well, can we go to the chair of the committee, Mr. Gordo? Do you have any comments in terms of ed tech?
I think it was a very thorough presentation, and the goal of the committee is simply to bring relief to restaurants and other businesses that rely on delivery service. Particularly in this time, we thought it was important to take the steps necessary to avoid price gouging, to put in place, at least temporarily during the crisis, a fair ordinance that also brings about transparency. One of the things we discovered is all of these fees are sort of lumped in. Some of them may not be known to the residents and consumers, and people may make different decisions based on the number of fees and who the fees go to, and the additional charge that's added to their bill that may or may not go to our local businesses. And so people, once armed with that information, may actually opt to go and pick up the food at curbside service, which will help our local business community because they receive more of the income that's generated by the service and product that they produce. The other issue was the issue of gratuities. The gratuities, I think when residents sign on to a gratuity or provide a gratuity to the person delivering the food, they intend the person who came to their door to receive the gratuity, and we discovered that that's not always the case. And so you'll find in here an element of protections, or at least disclosure. If you call it a gratuity, then it should be a gratuity, not part of the fee structure that then goes to the corporate entity that owns the app. And the staff the committee did set the parameters and asked the staff to adjust accordingly once LA County put its ordinance forward. And I believe that's occurred, and you've heard about some of the adjustments that were made. And so the committee unanimously recommended bringing this matter to full council for approval.
And Mr. Mayor, on the point that Mr. Gordo just made, the draft resolution that was attached to the staff report, again, came out prior to the information from the county. So based on council's direction, we would anticipate adjusting that a bit and finalizing it after the council meeting.
Okay.
So with that, I'd be happy to move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. Ms. McCaustin?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Ms. McCaustin?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you, Victor. I'm so glad you guys on the committee brought this forward. As someone who we tend to, because we're able to, we order directly from a restaurant and pick up ourselves, saving all of these all of these fees. I really had no idea of the complexity of the fee arrangement. I mean, I had heard from restaurateurs that it was so high, that the Grubhubs or whoever were charging so much. But until I read the staff report, I really had no idea of the, basically gouging that's going on at this time. So I completely support the work of the committee and the recommendation, especially the gratuity portion. I think that's really important. I think probably so many people, they just have no idea that, their tip is not is coming off the salary or the payment to the driver. And so this is good work, and I'm really happy to support it.
Thank you. Mr. Masuda? And then Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, I suppose you're the one that's answering for staff. So the 20% will drop the 25 to 30% for the delivery order? Is that what would be happening?
Right now, the amount that the Grubhub or other third-party services can charge the restaurant varies widely, and as Ms. Garrett suggested, it ranges from 20 to 30%. That the consumer really doesn't see. It really just is taken out of the profit and revenue of the restaurant. So we're suggesting at the staff and what other cities are doing to cap that portion to 15%.
Oh, to the 15%. Okay. Yeah. And then part of the report was that for pickup orders, it's 10 to 17% to the customer.
Yeah, that's a surprising kind of element that ultimately.
It is surprising.
Yeah, these third-party groups will post menus and kind of market the restaurants in various ways to make it easy for consumers to purchase these things over the phone or online. And ultimately, they charge those restaurants for that service, even though the consumer might pick up the food at the restaurant.
Yeah, what's surprising about that, I was leaving a tip when I went to go pick up things on top of that number. That's what's happening?
Yeah, if you're picking up and still tipping, that will, actually, that's a good question. That'll go to the staff at the restaurant at that point.
It actually depends on the software that the third-party delivery service uses to make the charge. So if you're using Grubhub or Uber Eats, in all likelihood, you're doing all of your payment processing through them. So it's very likely that the tip could go straight to the third-party delivery service. That is an element that we haven't fully researched and could certainly do so.
Presuming that if you give cash at that point while you're picking it up, then that goes to the actual restaurant.
Okay. Well, I don't want to shortchange the delivery person. Just don't want some sort of mechanism within the structure that cheats the customer. Okay.
I will add that of the restaurateurs that we canvassed, we did talk with a handful of them one-on-one, and even though they are having to pay out a commission fee on a pickup or takeout order, they do see it as marketing and exposure. So there is a cost for doing that, and they understood that in advertising on these different third service delivery platforms, that they are getting exposure that they wouldn't otherwise have. So to a certain extent, the commission on a pickup or takeout order is kind of justified.
I see. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, having been on the committee that evaluated this, the fee structure is a bit like car leasing, where, how many miles do you want, what's the residual, what your trading is. You have absolutely no idea how this all adds up. So we had to send the staff back a few times to get us educated. I do think this is appropriate given the need for restaurateurs to depend on delivery services. In normal circumstances, this is probably not a significant part of their revenue stream. It's kind of icing on the cake. But under today's circumstances, this has become kind of a mission critical part of their business. And taking, a third of the revenue off the top doesn't allow the businesses to survive. And I think all of us are concerned about the longevity of our restaurant network and community. So I do think it's appropriate. I would highlight, I think Councilmember McCostin mentioned it, we did do some work around tip flow to the driver. And that is a kind of frontline job in many cases. And I do still have some concerns when we looked at some pro forma work, which Michelle didn't share tonight. It became obvious that these drivers really don't even make minimum wage, and they're using their own vehicles and driving around, and that's a whole different problem. At minimum, though, I think ensuring that the tips that are directed by the consumer when a delivery order arrives does indeed make its way to the driver is important. And in the pro forma, that tip could be up to 50% of their compensation under a typical transaction. So there's a whole different complexity over there that we just started to scratch the surface on. I do think this is an appropriate action.
When cities across the United States have enacted these orders, that one city that I mentioned in New Jersey, which was Jersey City, what they did there when the 10% commission cap was enacted, the third-party delivery services then started tacking on a $3 service fee because the cap was eating into their profits. When the state came in later and then adopted a higher statewide cap, that $3 fee essentially went away. However, it does remain nationwide, and it's called a small ticket order fee. Outside of that one instance where we saw some sort of retaliatory action, it's unlikely that they would pull out of a market as large as Los Angeles in this region. So I'm not terribly concerned that that could happen, although in this day and age, anything could happen.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Madison had his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I too sit on the committee that discussed this, and it's complex economic regulation. There are a number of stakeholders here. Obviously, I think our primary concerns should be with our residents and with our businesses, the restaurants. But to some extent, also the employees that work for these services. And I have to confess, I'm a little uneasy about wading into this, especially on an emergency declaration basis. This is complicated. Now, having said that, I'm somewhat buoyed by the fact that other cities have taken this step, and that our staff feels that this is appropriate. But I certainly would prefer to be doing this in a more deliberate way with a more input from all of the stakeholders and more thoughtful regulation. I suppose the emergency nature of it cuts both ways in that sense, that we're doing this temporarily, and presumably we'd come back to it if we felt some long-term regulatory scheme was appropriate or necessary. So I intend to support it, but I just wanted to share that unease that I have, both kind of procedurally and substantively. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this item? Did we have any public comment?
No, Mayor, not on this item.
All right, so Mr. Gordo has offered this, and it was seconded by Vice Mayor Hampton.
That's correct.
There's no further discussion. Let's have a roll call.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
The motion is
Mayor, if I
approved
may-
without opposition.
Ms. Gordo?
I'd just like to, Mr. Madison is absolutely correct. This is extremely complicated, but given the situation that we're in, And given the issue of fairness to employees, when somebody says gratuity, I think they intend it to be for the employees. And given the issue of transparency, I think it's the right thing to do. And I'd like to thank the staff, Michelle in particular, for doing a terrific job of researching the issue and helping us wind our way through what is a very complex issue.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. All right, we'll move to item 26, the COVID-19 update from the city manager, Mr. Mermel.
And again, Mayor, just a moment while we bring Dr. Go into the meeting. Is she there?
She's coming in.
So, Mayor, we have 3 updates for the council and the public today. We're going to start with Dr. Go, then we're going to turn to Joaquin Siquez on behalf of the Transportation Department to talk about our support for local restaurants through outside dining, and then we'll have Bill Wong from the Housing Department to give a report back on the city's emergency rental assistance program. So, with no further ado, I see Dr. Go is in her flight control position there, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Go.
And Mayor, on item 26B, we do have a public comment, so when we get there.
On 26 what, B?
B.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Go, welcome.
Good afternoon. I wanted to start by providing some context for the latest health officer orders by providing an update on the state monitoring metrics for Pasadena. The county has been averaging 3,100 new cases a day. We have observed an increase in cases from exposures occurring around the 4th of July holiday. We appreciate the cooperation of many of the people we have interviewed in providing information about their activities and contacts. Major risk factors that have been identified include being a household contact with someone with COVID-19, visiting other areas of the country with high levels of cases, being exposed at work, and attending large social gatherings. Over the last 2 weeks, among racial groups in Pasadena, the number of cases per population among Latinx residents has increased twice as fast as for other groups. And the median age continues to drop. The median age of cases continues to drop. Now we're at 51 years. About 4 weeks ago, we were at 58. Over the last 7 days, we have had 231 new cases, and more than 60% of the cases was among people 40 years of age or under. Our positivity rate has increased over the past 4 weeks to 11.4%. So last week, on Monday, the state health officer ordered closed several sectors statewide and closed additional sectors in public health jurisdictions and counties on the monitoring list, including jurisdictions in LA County. Namely, those sectors were closed. The indoor operations of those sectors that were closed included gyms and fitness centers, places of worship for indoor celebrations, offices for non-critical infrastructure operations, personal care services, and shopping malls. In addition, last Friday, the state health officer specified and ordered that schools and school districts may reopen for in-person instruction only if they are located in a local health jurisdiction that has not been on the county monitoring list in the past 14 days. Los Angeles County has been on the monitoring list since the beginning, and so both public and private schools in Los Angeles County are not permitted to open for in-person instruction at this time. They should start the school year with online or distance learning only. The indicators that are keeping LA on the list, namely the case rate, are still increasing, as are hospitalizations for COVID-19. The health department continues to work proactively with partner agencies, healthcare and congregate living facilities, educational institutions, businesses, and other city departments to address the impact of COVID-19. We are doing case investigation, contact tracing, epidemiologic surveillance, public education and messaging, population-specific outreach, such as to younger residents in our Latinx community, promotion of testing, and providing guidance based on the latest science as it evolves. But this is only part of the required COVID-19 response. There are things that each of us can and need to do. Today on the governor's briefing, we heard Governor Newsom emphasize the personal responsibility we all have to do the things that will protect each other and our community and enable our business and school sectors to open or remain open. These include wearing a mask whenever you leave home, watching your distance. That means maintaining physical distancing at least 6 feet apart from others and avoiding crowds and indoor spaces. Keep in mind that being outdoors does not mean you are not at risk. You should still wear a mask and physically distance. Wash your hands often. Avoid mixing or gathering with people you don't live with. This is how many people that we've heard from in Pasadena are becoming infected. Answer the phone when the health department calls. Sometimes we reach people who are in a rush, who are busy, or reluctant to share information for various information in order to do effective contact tracing. We need businesses and workplaces to be forthcoming, timely, and cooperative with sharing information. This is the only way to keep the sectors open. Please stay home if you have any symptoms. We are finding that people may not recognize symptoms as significant or as related to COVID-19, and they are still going to work or socializing with others. Be extra vigilant and cautious at this time. Be aware of your symptoms because of the widespread COVID-19. And finally, if you are getting tested, you are on quarantine while you wait for your results. And you are on quarantine for 14 days, no matter what your test results are, if you have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. Negative test results do not release you from quarantine. Health officer orders make this quarantine your legal obligation. And people are also ordered to stay at home if you are sick with COVID-19 or even suspected COVID-19 for a minimum of 10 days and longer than that if your symptoms have not improved. And that is my message for today.
Thank you, Dr. Go. Questions for Dr. Go? Mr. Wilson, then Mr. Gordo.
Thank you, Dr. Go. I'm sorry, in your statistics, I don't believe you shared any stats, or maybe I missed them, on where things stand at Huntington Hospital in terms of bed availability, respirators, ICU space, things
Sure.
like.
So we monitor the data that they share with us, and currently they have expanded due to a request of the county healthcare system. They've expanded their staffing and bed availability. And so we are still meeting that metric as far as what's available. We have not crossed the threshold on the county monitoring list for surpassing or having limited ICU or bed capacity just at that one hospital at Huntington. Countywide, they are confirming the highest number of people yet hospitalized with COVID-19, and that number is 2,216. And 26% of those confirmed cases of those over 2,000 people are in the ICU, and 19% are confirmed on ventilators. So countywide, as a healthcare system, they're also monitoring their capacity.
I'm sorry, so you mentioned that we had expanded, or Huntington had expanded their capacity. Do you know what is their new capacity and what percent of capacity are they currently at?
So I'm always hesitant to state their numbers because sometimes there are differences in what we receive, and then we hear back after the council meeting that we didn't give the right numbers. So I would prefer to defer them. But the threshold for the state monitoring list for percent of ICU beds currently available, if it's less than 20%, then that's a red flag on the monitoring list. And based on our numbers right now, it looks like we're at 45% of beds. We're at 45% are currently available. So we have more available than the limit. And then for ventilators, it looks like we have 65% available. And the cutoff for that is if it's fewer than 25% available, that's a red flag.
And I also understand there's maybe been some change in the treatment regimen in terms of the use of ventilators. Is that correct?
Well, you know what, I think I'd have to discuss it with our clinical counterparts to really understand why it looks like there's a larger number of hospitalizations and fewer ventilators, people on ventilators. in some of the ICU beds that are being, well, so I would say that I have heard that there are some considerations for, because we have more treatment options as far as medications such as remdesivir and dexamethasone, it could be that some of these worst outcomes might be averted. Although the outcomes that are being impacted are usually mortality and duration of hospitalization. So it's possible.
So our last question is, obviously at the end of June, because of the then seeming lack of need for the capacity of the beds at the convention center, that facility was decommissioned. What is your latest assessment about the probability or potential need to reinstall or reactivate that facility?
Sure. I think that the goal, and what I've heard countywide as well, that's been confirmed by by Dr. Gailey, is that the issue right now is not the physical beds. The issue is the staffing, and trying to make sure we have enough staffing to provide the care, the level of care that we would need in a surge. So that's being addressed countywide. And also, I think that the idea is that the best beds are the ones that are staffed that are close to the hospital, as opposed to a little bit more remotely in some of these alternative sites that were previously in existence.
I might ask the city manager and Dr. Go at our next city council meeting, the need to understand our hospital capacity is so critical in terms of that's where the real train wreck could be. It would be great to invite the Huntington Hospital again to return now that the circumstances have turned a little bit more dire. Obviously, in terms of healthcare practices, there are a lot of things you can be doing. But as I always like to say, that they're the tail at the end of the dog. I mean, ultimately, the lives will be lost or saved in terms of our hospitalization capability. So I'd ask that next time we get together, we include them. Thank you for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Councilmember Gordo.
Thank you. Dr. Go, given the increase in the Latino community, Latinx, Latino, however we're defining it, what are we doing to outreach to that community?
It's a really important question and a high priority. And we have, as we've seen the populations that are impacted shift, we have been trying to tailor our communications and outreach and resources towards those populations. And I will add that that doesn't mean that the African-American population is not affected. They are still having high case rates. It's just that the dramatic increase in case rates has been among the Latino population. So our PIO office has helped us with developing a messaging and communications plan that includes, and I would invite them to speak more in more detail about that, but it includes some innovative attempts or approaches to having some, what are they called, the influencers who are on social media, who are younger, who are Latinx, reaching out to those communities. And so they're taking the lead on our outreach efforts. We are working also in cooperation with community organizations that serve the Latino population and looking at where we intersect, for example, in our WIC program and with our Tobacco Coalition, our Youth Tobacco Coalition program to identify ways for both young people and Latino populations to be connected to the services they need. That includes healthcare. It includes the education messages, and it includes testing as well.
Yeah, so I'd like to understand what we're doing differently than we were doing before the surge in this particular demographic, particularly reaching out in Spanish.
Yeah.
And you know, the younger generation will likely speak English and communicate by social media. It's the older members of the community that we ought to be focused on in Spanish and reaching out in different ways. And so I'll reach out and ask my field rep to set up a meeting and we can talk about that.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. Mr. Madison?
Thank you, Mayor. And Dr. Go and the city manager very kindly participated in a town hall that we held through Zoom in District 6 last week, and varying times we had over 100 people. So I heard much of the report last week. But Dr. Go, to follow up, the general sort of view seems to be that cases are, and you used the word surge, I would submit we're experiencing a surge right now, wouldn't you say, of cases, certainly?
Yes.
But that the age of the infected is coming down in terms of the average age, and that may correspond with a lower fatality rate and even a lower hospitalization rate. And we're speaking generalities here. That doesn't mean that somebody that's 30 years old can't be fatally stricken with COVID. We just saw that in Pasadena. 30-year-old succumbed, as I understand. But do you agree with that general sort of?
Yeah, so I think that the rates that we see of hospitalization and mortality groups, however, because of the increased number of people getting infected, we're still going to see the surge in our healthcare system in terms of the number of people requiring hospitalization and having severe disease, because there's so many more people getting infected.
So the real numbers may well grow and could even grow at a rapid rate, even if the rate percentage-wise is dropping.
Yes.
And my understanding is in Pasadena, the average age of the fatality cases, the decedents, is still in the mid-80s.
Correct.
Fair to say?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you. Anybody else for Dr. Go? Ms. Kennedy?
Dr. Go, you may have already explained this, but do you have the authority to prevent Pasadena Unified School District from opening?
So I haven't explained this yet. The state health officer order has effectively prevented them from opening. There is I will be issuing, upon discussion with our attorneys, an order to reference the state health officer order, just so it's very clear, so there's no confusion that order does apply in our jurisdiction. And so yes, both the state order and the order that I will issue will because of the epidemiology, because of the numbers that we're seeing, because the county is on the monitoring list, that will prevent PUSD from opening in person.
But what I want to know, I appreciate your response and it was thorough, but what I want to know, do you have the authority?
Yes.
Excellent. And I hope you will exercise that authority with the science, whatever the science is that you learn in talking to your colleagues and others who are experts in the field. In terms of mortality, the previous council member, I think it was Madison, asked a question, or one of my colleagues asked a question, and you talked about the majority of mortality is at the 80-year-old or octogenarian age level. However, I would like to know, since there is the spike at a younger age, what do we know and what do we think the mortality is for, let's say, our residents under the age of 50?
So we will, I can't quote you the current numbers based on the CDC data. The study that I recall, well, if you want Pasadena numbers, I can get those to you. The case fatality rate, yeah, I don't have it pulled up right now.
The reason why that would be important, in my view, for all of the council members, is to direct information to the group that needs it most.
So the messages are for everybody. So the group that needs it the most, as far as the risk for fatality, is, of course, the older you are, the more your the case fatality rate that we've observed goes up. And so that's why we've used a somewhat artificial number 65 and older, because even for folks who are 50 to 65, the case fatality rate that's been observed is higher than for those who are 0 to 18. And so the messaging is for if you're older or have underlying medical conditions to stay home as much as
I think
possible.
we're losing you a little bit, Dr. Go.
I'm sorry. Are we okay?
I think so,
Okay. So, so the messaging is for folks who are older or who have underlying medical conditions to stay home as much as possible, and to follow all the guidance when they do go out, as far as wearing face coverings and maintaining physical distance. However, that's not enough. We can't really protect those folks with in the categories with a higher case fatality rate if we people of all ages don't take the same steps and the same measures. Because as we can see, the disease transmission is just going up and up, and that puts everybody, especially those at a higher risk of mortality or morbidity, at greater risk.
in terms of your own resources in your shop, is there anything that you don't have that you need that would help provide greater safety to the residents, visitors, business owners in the city of Pasadena?
Well, I appreciate that very much. We are bringing on 5 contact tracers from the state on Wednesday. And so we are accessing resources as we need them. It's not always easy to bring on, new nurses and new epidemiologists, and we're working through the finding of those human resources. Those are things that we do need, and so we're trying to bring those on as quickly as possible.
And lastly, okay, I'm trying to close this message box. And lastly, one of the rare times I've forgotten what I was about to say. The resources you have, testing. Oh, here it is. Does it make sense for you in your official capacity to lobby the council through the city manager that we would provide facial coverings for free for every resident in the city of Pasadena, 1, and then 2, that we would test every resident in the city of Pasadena through the various ways in which you can test, because there are different kinds of tests.
Sure.
Do either of those make sense? And am I putting you on the spot where I want?
No, not at all. I think that the good thing about face coverings is that what we're recommending is with basic materials that you have at home. And so you can see people with handkerchiefs or t-shirts. And so I don't think that it's not accessible to anyone to not have a face covering. That's probably not the issue. Having access to something that you can use is probably not the issue. It's probably changing practice and making sure that you have it with you every time and that you do use it. I think that as far as testing, it's much more complicated because the test we're mostly talking about is a diagnostic test, and that's a point in time. And so we have some people who may get tested weekly, and it doesn't provide them that much information. And what we need is for people to have their doctors help guide them so that they can get a test when they need a test, when it's useful for their for the information that's needed to keep them safe and keep their families safe. So it's we need to be working in our healthcare system to provide the right amount of tests to the right people at the right time to make that useful.
So you are not a proponent, as some are, that everyone in a community needs to be tested?
Everyone in a community who has been exposed to someone with COVID-19 or who has symptoms of COVID-19, I make my priority to make sure that we can get them a test. That is important.
So I arranged, and I won't ask belabor it anymore, Mayor, other than this question. I arranged for a husband and wife to be tested at the Rose Bowl when we were providing the testing there. The fire department and whoever was actually doing the physical testing accommodated them. Both were asymptomatic, and the wife tested positive, and they both went through a quarantine period. So in your answer, it obviously is more complicated when there are a host of Americans or residents or people who live in the United States who are asymptomatic.
It's a very large proportion, and from the research study that we published, we found as many as 40% of residents and staff in SNFs asymptomatic. 40% of the people who tested positive were asymptomatic. And so there are other considerations, and right now is the supply of testing that's available as to what the prioritization of testing is. And if we could test for example, on a regular basis, we could come up with some kind of a surveillance schedule, like every 2 days or weekly, or monthly, or, these are some of the models that are being put out there for schools, for example, or work sites. And those kinds of models just aren't practical right now because we don't even have enough tests. We're running into this barrier again of limited resources. So it's a complicated question, as you said, and the answers are complicated. It depends on the situation.
So Kate Perry, Congresswoman Kate Perry, asked the head of CDC on the record, would you test everyone and provide those tests for free? The answer to that question was yes. Have we received any assistance, and other communities received any assistance from CDC as it relates to obtaining test kits, whether they be blood serum or antibodies, et cetera?
So yes, the state has convened a new testing task force, and they are able to access resources from the federal government, but they are also getting resources themselves for the state, and we have access to those resources through our MOAC, our medical health or operational area, and we make requests, and when those supplies are available, they come to our community. So yes, we do have access to resources.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Go. I would simply say that you're in a very difficult hot seat, and we have great expectations from you. I'm glad you're there taking some of the arrows and have stood when other directors of health departments chose to resign. And I applaud you. Do everything you can to continue to keep our community safe, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Dr. Go?
I just have one question as it relates to mandatory reporting of elder abuse. And I don't know if this is a Dr. Go question or a Steve Mermel question, or is the fire chief available?
Why don't you ask the question, Vice?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, I don't believe that the interim fire chief is still in the building.
It's true. I mean, you mentioned this in a previous meeting when we got one of these COVID updates. It's true that the fire department and the police department are mandatory reporters of elder abuse.
I believe that's the case, yes.
For the past 5 years, I don't know if this information is probably not available right now, but in one of your updates to us, could you let us know how many times that actually has been reported? And also, what training do our police and firefighters receive as it relates to mandatory reporting for elder abuse? Like, do they actually know what elder abuse looks like?
Vice Mayor, I'm taking the question down and I'll follow up.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mr. Gordo?
Some of the questions caused me to, okay. So, Dr. Go, in terms of your orders, what's the enforcement mechanism? Are your orders enforced directly by the health department? Do you work with the city prosecutor? How is it that when you issue an order, we can say to, you know, businesses or anyone who's not complying with the order, as we've heard is occurring, how is it that you're able to enforce it?
Sure.
The order specifically?
Well, we always start with education. So we always make sure that the people in question who are in violation know about the order and know what they should be doing. And then the other enforcement mechanisms might include citation. And it does include, it's a whole city effort. So I can see if Steve has anything more specific to add.
You broke up a little bit. Can you just repeat that?
Sure. I'd said that we always start with education. We always have to make sure that the people in question know about the orders, they know what they should be doing. And then we work with other city departments as a team for enforcement mechanisms that might include citation or permits could be removed if or suspended if orders are not followed. But I think Steve might have some more to add as far as the overall enforcement picture.
Yeah.
And council member, I would just add, as Dr. Go points out, it's really a combined effort across city departments, and including the prosecutor and the city attorney's office. As issues come up, depending on what the nature of the issue is, we may involve the prosecutor, we may involve code enforcement. So it's been, from a city perspective, we've been operating as a team. We continue to do so as we work through both, and you'll hear in the next report, facilitating business operations, but also reminding those who are perhaps not following the orders of the need to do so.
And so, city manager or Dr. Go, are you coordinating with the prosecutor's office and making use of code enforcement and health inspectors? And have we actually taken action to enforce orders?
The answer is yes. And what we've done in most instances, when code enforcement or another city department visit, more often than not, we're getting a complaint of a business not complying. Usually a letter or a personal visit is all that's necessary to achieve compliance. I would have to turn to the city attorney as to whether the prosecutor's office has actually had to file any sort of a misdemeanor charge against anybody. I'm not aware of one.
We have filed price gouging, and I think we did one more, but it's been a small number so far, the actual filings.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Go. Keep up the good work. We'll now move to Joaquin Sequez to talk about the update on efforts to support local restaurants through outside dining. And
thank
Mark,
you, Mayor. And I think Joaquin is there. He is.
Mark, was there a public comment? Do you want to read that one comment?
Sure, I can read that first, Mayor. That's from Brian Wallace from the Playhouse District. The Playhouse Village Association expresses its appreciation for the tireless work by city staff and others to implement in-street dining areas along Colorado Boulevard in Playhouse Village. Already, these dining areas have transformed the heart of Playhouse Village, becoming a more vibrant place with enhanced economic and pedestrian activity. We look forward to further refinements to the installations and continuing to support our restaurants and other merchants to regain their economic footing. Thank you to the City Council for your support in this effort. That completes the public comment, Mayor.
Thank you. Joaquin?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Again, for the record, Joaquin Sequez, Transportation Department. If we can get the first slide up, that'd be great.
It's coming up. And then Joaquin, just say next slide and I'll move it forward for you.
Thank you, sir. So today, if we can go on to the next slide, I'll be providing the update on the on-street dining and parklets, really talk about what's happened in the last 2 weeks and the implementations that are in place. The temporary on-street dining guidelines and application was posted on July 9th, and we've received 14 applications as of this morning. So in the next few slides, I'll provide an update on the deployment which occurred during the past 2 weeks in the 2 business districts, Old Pasadena and Playhouse Village. But I did want to note that we will review applications from restaurants outside of the business improvement district to see what options are available, either on private property, such as parking lots, alleys, sidewalks, and also on street. Next slide, please. The Old Pasadena area where we've initiated the on-street dining is broken up into two phases. You'll see phase one in blue, which was Colorado Boulevard between Fair Oaks and Raymond on the south side of the street, and a section of Union Street between Fair Oaks and Raymond on the north side of the street. And this was implemented on July 11th. This past Saturday, we implemented phase two, which is the red sections on the map here. And that includes the north side of Colorado Boulevard between Fair Oaks and Arroyo Parkway, a section of Raymond between Holly and Union, a piece in Union between Fair Oaks and DeLacy, and two sections on Green Street, the north side of the street between Pasadena and DeLacy, and the south side of the street between DeLacy and Fair Oaks. Next slide, please. The phase one implementation that occurred on July, some of the on-street dining, you can see the use by the restaurants. The top image is Colorado Boulevard between Fair Oaks Avenue and Raymond Avenue. Serves three restaurants that I can think of there: Barcelona, Chorizo, and We Olive. The bottom image is Union Street between Raymond Avenue and Fair Oaks, which serves the Union Restaurant, Pearl, and the Blind Donkey. Next slide, please. The section here in Old Pasadena is what was implemented this past Saturday on street. So the image on the left is the north side of Colorado between Fair Oaks and Raymond Avenue. And this is what the deployment looks like before the restaurants move in their furniture. So I wanted to show kind of the width of the area and the ramps that the city provides to provide access into the on-street dining area. On the right is the image on south side of Green Street between DeLacy and Fair Oaks. And this is the Buca de Beppo restaurant. And you'll see what that area looks like when it's filled with tables and umbrellas ready for on-street dining. Next slide, please. In the Playhouse Village, we implemented also in phase one and phase two, with phase one again being July 11th on Colorado Boulevard, both the north and south side of the street between Madison and El Molino. And then going east, we implemented phase two this Saturday between El Molino and Oak Knoll, both the north side and the south side, and then that section between Oak Knoll and Hudson on the south side. The next slide, please. The image on the left shows the phase one implementation on the north side of Colorado between Madison and El Molino. And this is the area near Tender Greens and Cerbelo. And the image on the right is the Colorado Boulevard south side of the street between Madison and El Molino. And this table layout, this on-street dining, is for the Nayas restaurant. Next slide, please. The phase two implementation from this past Saturday, the image on the left and the lower image on the bottom of the screen is the south side of Colorado between Oak Knoll and Hudson. And this area here is a little different than the other ones because the application was pulled by the Playhouse Village business district as a communal dining area. So you'll see in that area the same types of tables and chairs throughout, different umbrellas, and the smaller restaurants that may not have the ability to put their own furniture in the street are able to use the communal dining for patrons that come to obtain takeout food that could be eaten in the communal dining area. The image on the top right is the south side of Colorado between El Molino and Oak Knoll. And this is here as an El Portal, that area of the restaurants there. And that was the implementation again from this past Saturday. Next slide, please. As we move on beyond the on-street dining, wanted to provide a little bit of an update on our temporary parklets guidelines and applications, which were posted on July 16th, last Thursday. Next slide. This allows for restaurants to provide a dining area and also for other businesses to provide an area that's flush with the sidewalk within an existing parking space. As we had mentioned before, some of these areas cannot block utilities such as manholes or valve covers or storm drains, and they're designated for streets that are posted 25 miles per hour. The city is working on design plans for a prototype so that businesses don't have to go to the cost of designing a parklet. They can use a standard prototype plan and then apply with that plan for implementation of a parklet. And that's the last slide I have on the on-street dining and parklets applications and program and how they've been implemented these past couple of weeks. I have been getting a lot of great feedback from the restaurants. Some of the restaurants seeing their biggest sales since March when the in-restaurant dining was closed down. So it's great to be able to provide these types of facilities for restaurants to apply for on-street dining. And I do want to mention that the not only the transportation team that's been working literally around the clock, but also planning department, public works, and the permit review, fire and PD. There's been a lot of coordination here to get these implemented and out on the street. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Joaquin. Questions or comments, Mr. Gordo, and then Mr. Wilson?
Thank you. This matter too has wound its way through the EdTech committee, and I just want to thank staff for achieving some of these. It's been a tough subject, but I think we've made some progress, and I think the results are there. The goal of the committee was to give some flexibility in how operators are able to use both outdoor private property as well as public space differently. I think the prototype will be very helpful to give some guidance. But one of the things that has been brought to my attention is so many small businesses are so heavily impacted when they want to try and use outdoor space. It's just an additional cost. And at EdTech, we discussed the possibility of assisting businesses who are going to, experience additional costs as they move to use their space outdoors. I know some cities, Glendale and Sierra Madre and others have actually put money into helping businesses create an outdoor, either on private property or public property, ambiance that then benefits both the operator, the consumers, and then ultimately the city, because we protect the tax base. Has the city manager, have we made any progress in that regard? I mean, some businesses are saying to me, look, even if we provided a $1,500 grant that could be used to buy plants and improve the ambiance along some of these streets, or as they move to do space differently. So I'd like the council to consider that as more and more businesses will have to use outdoor space. And I'm not talking about large grants, just small grants that would help get them or allow them to use the space differently outdoors.
Yeah, Councilmember Gordo, I believe will be coming forward at the next council meeting on the 27th with an appropriation of about $275,000. About $200,000 of that is to support the cost of the on-street dining that Joaquin described. And then an additional $75,000 is a recommendation from staff to do exactly what you're suggesting to help sort of buy down the cost of establishing the in-street dining, parklets, and what have you, because we're sensitive to those cost impacts for businesses.
And I think we should, it helps with the feel and look of the city as well, if we're able to improve the environment in the system in doing that. But I don't think we should limit it to the in-street. I think we should assist people, small businesses in particular, as they look to use space outdoors in general, whether it's private property or public property. And particularly because it helps, we just had the update from stocks are go. And to the extent that businesses are reopening, and they're operating outdoors, I think it'll be a tremendous assistance so that people can comply with some of the orders. And do it in a way that maybe gives our city a little bit better ambiance in and around our, not just business districts, but throughout the city. And so I would, as you come back with that recommendation, Steve, let's give some thought to that.
Sure, that'll be next Monday.
Great. All right. Mr. Wilson, did you?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Kennedy.
Okay. Thank you.
He was before me.
Thanks, John. Thank you for the report, and I said I'm glad this is moving forward, and I too congratulate the staff for moving this expeditiously. Joaquin, I was curious, most of your presentation was about partial street closures. Can you give us an update on the other applications around sidewalk, dining, converting private? Was that the 14 applications, or is that a different number? I'm losing track of all the programs.
That is a different number. I don't have that number in front of me right now. The 14 applications was solely for the on-street, and it represents a little under 40 restaurants that are within this reach. So we are expecting more applications as there is more of a demand to use that space, and we see restaurants beginning to put their tables in that space.
Councilmember Wilson, it appears that we have 39 applications to date, and then 14 for on-street, but so the others would be presumably for sidewalk dining, and I'm scanning a quick list, so I believe just under 40.
Okay, that's good to know, because I think the concept was to have a toolkit. Not everyone is going to be able to be in a place where partial street closures make sense. I'd be super interested, and I'm always reticent to create work for staff, but to get some sense around, occupancy and usage of these spaces. I mean, the pictures are nice because you see people there, but it would be nice to know whether that's all the time, how full they are. Is there any ability or any plan to get some data around what is happening in those spaces?
We will definitely work with the business districts to obtain that information anecdotally. As I've been there a few times both weekends, they are filling up. The tables are full. The restaurants are really appreciating it. So they are getting a lot of use, but I wouldn't have any time of day information. So I will reach out to those districts to request that information.
It'd be nice to say, and that would be a great thing for them to check, have some sort of framework that they could use. So when they came back, we could get a sense of how important this is and whether we should be putting more dollars and they're maxing out or reallocating some areas. Because I know from the city's perspective, the barriers are certainly a cost and expense, and those obviously can be moved around as well. Councilmember Gorda mentioned the grants. I don't know, Steve, is there any reason that people couldn't apply for the small business relief fund dollars and those could be used for investing? Maybe we don't limit how those dollars are being used. Couldn't those dollars be directed towards these types of improvements? And I don't know, Steve, if you have any updates on the small business relief fund project that the Pasadena Community Foundation is pursuing. Those two questions are related.
Well, presumably a number of our local restaurateurs that would take advantage of the sidewalk or in-street dining also made application for the business assistance grants. I do understand that there was sort of another surge, a good surge of people applying for the grant. And we do have, I can't recall the timing, but I'm hopeful that we can have an update to council next Monday on where we stand in terms of how many applications were received. It sounded as if the Community Foundation had a good handle on being able to move forward with at least a round one. And then there was some discussion about perhaps a round two process. So we'll have more information for you at the next meeting.
And please include how they're doing on the matching grant part of the funding. I'm hoping
yes,
that our participating But just to confirm, I don't believe there's any limitation on those dollars. Once again, if they needed to buy outdoor tables and umbrellas and spend those grant dollars in that way to take advantage of outdoor dining, I'm quite sure that would be permissible. Is that correct?
I think that's right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate the work, and thanks, Joaquin.
Mr. Kennedy?
Gene had his hand up.
Mr. Masuda?
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. I just have a few questions. Joaquin, what about safety? Did you get to talk about safety? What comes in my mind is Santa Monica. You know, there was a mall out there, and then there was a huge accident, and a senior actually was the problem, and you know, it was so unfortunate. And so, how much is safety on your mind from the transportation department?
It's a great question, Councilmember Masuda. It's one of the things that we're always looking at, not only from the transportation point of view, but also from the standpoint of providing space that's not in a typical space where you would see pedestrians or dining. There is always a risk when you change the configuration of a roadway and are putting people out in the street. And we've tried to mitigate that risk through things such as the water-filled barricades. We also have in the implementation concrete K-rail. We have different end treatments, not only to keep an errant motorist safe from hitting a concrete barrier, but also to keep the pedestrians within the on-street dining area safe from a vehicle intrusion. So we are definitely taking a look at that. In addition to the physical devices on the street, we're also modifying signal timing at the intersections on either side of these closures to make sure that we're not having kind of a green band of faster moving traffic. So we're using operations as well to slow down traffic in this area. The fact that it's now a single lane does create some congestion, which further slows down traffic. These are all considerations that we definitely took a close look at before implementing the guide and identifying which street segments made the most sense to implement on-street dining.
Got a feeling Councilmember Kennedy is going to come behind me and talk about something similar, because I saw his head bobbing up and down when I asked you about safety. The second thing about the parklets, have there been very many accidents in with parklets?
We've been looking into the safety of parklets in other cities and haven't found many collisions that we've been able to find from reaching out to the different agencies, both that have done it short term and some that have done it some longer term. Again, one of the key pieces of the parklet component is also the speed limit on the street. And as we start getting applications for parklets, we are taking a look at the conditions of the street and the speed limits. It helps that there's parked vehicles on both sides of the parklet because that acts as a buffer. Similar to the on-street dining, where we have the angled parking, it helps quite a bit. But we will continue to do more research to see about that. But that is something that we definitely consider and have to balance when we're trying to expand the sidewalk space. It's similar to sidewalk dining in that it's raised at a sidewalk level. So now we're expanding that into what was parking space, similar to like a curb extension. So that's part of the considerations that we take a look at when we'll receive applications.
Thank you, Joaquin. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy and then Ms. McCausland.
Thank you, Mayor. Gene, you're right, Councilmember Masuda. What I'd like to know, Joaquin, and this is not a ad hominem attack or anything of that nature, was the Pasadena Police Department contacted to be a part of the planning of placing these barriers for this type of use?
Yes, we worked with Pasadena PD and Pasadena Fire on the implementation, the types of devices, the consideration for what is being put out in the street. So they were definitely part of the process.
And though you were working very quickly to accomplish this goal, was there in fact a written plan that you could come before the public safety and share as much as you can without giving away the secret recipe?
Councilmember Kennedy, so we worked through the issue of the sidewalk dining with the Ed Tech committee. And so that was the council subcommittee that focused on this issue. As I indicated earlier when Dr. Go was presenting, in all aspects of this, whether it's enforcement of health orders, facilitating on-street and sidewalk dining, all the various aspects involved in the city's efforts to deal with COVID-19, all the departments are working closely with one another because really these issues cross all the organizational lines that we have. So everyone's working together, everyone's pulling the oar in the same direction. In this instance, trying to support our local businesses, and so everyone's been involved.
It's incumbent upon me and all who are extremely well qualified to talk about public safety issues that we at least at the council level have some discussion, but in my view, the right place to have a fuller discussion is before the Public Safety Committee. And my questions are narrowly tailored and focused on the safety of our residents and visitors in this new configuration of wanting to support our restaurateurs and others in terms of outside activities. So I believe it is just part of my job, part of my committee's job to understand and ask those critical questions to do exactly what I believe Councilmember Masuda shared with us, and that to prevent some kind of catastrophe. And we need some form of briefing, and as I said, without sharing the secret sauce, so we can give some input. The members of my committee have tremendous experience that could possibly be useful to Joaquin and his organization and to the city proper.
Councilmember Kennedy, the Transportation Department staff would be happy to make a presentation about traffic safety that would include issues of parklets and what have you at an appropriate time for the Public Safety Committee. As it relates to the staff level response, we're trying to be quick in supporting our local businesses. The two are not mutually exclusive, so we can arrange that appropriate briefing. Joaquin and his coworkers in the Transportation Department they have the appropriate credentials and licensures to ensure that whatever treatments are placed out in the street meet standards. That's one of the concerns. We never want to put anybody out there unless it's safe. And so they're doing all that work, and at the appropriate time, they will be happy to share that with the Public Safety Committee.
Oh, thank you for the response. So if it's quick, if it's fast, and if it's good, those are the questions. If it's quick, if it's fast, if it's good. Generally, oftentimes you can't have all of them at the same time, but I hope that is the case here. So just to wrap up this questioning, Joaquin, was there a quote unquote threat assessment or what if scenario in terms of project planning, in terms of business resiliency? Did that happen?
There was definitely a plan that we went through to identify the locations, the safety of the locations, specifically the types of treatments that would provide the level of safety that we were comfortable with for on-street dining based on the environment of the on-street dining locations. Again, with streets that are speed limit at 25 miles an hour. So we did go through that process. Not trying to understand the business interest portion of that question.
The business interest?
Yeah, I thought you had mentioned something about the business interest of the threat assessment.
Oh, I'm only speaking about public safety and really a law enforcement type of activity, and just making sure that all of our residents and visitors and the business owners are safe in this new configuration, if you will. I would like a more detailed understanding that would be too involved to have here. So I'm looking forward to you coming, or other staff coming before the Public Safety Committee to brief the whole committee about those types of issues. And really, we're talking about trying to be prophylactic so it doesn't occur. And I think you already appreciate where I'm coming from, given your response to Councilmember Masuda. Could you hear me okay during this process?
Yes, I could hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you very much for your leadership, and thank you for getting this together so quickly. Thank you, Mayor.
Member McCaustin.
Thank you. I'd just like to get a little more information, I guess, Joaquin, maybe it's from you, about kind of where these restaurants are utilizing. I know not just the street space, but sometimes the extra parking space they may have, or private space adjacent. Are they all primarily in the business districts, in the old Pasadena and South Lake Business District, or have you had applications from kind of one-off restaurants in different parts of the city?
I can speak specifically to the on-street dining component of it, and that's been specific to Old Pasadena and Playhouse at this point. We have received some individual applications, or not yet applications, but requests for information from other businesses that are outside of the business district, and we walk through the process with them to see if there's something that they can do before we look at going on street. So if they have a parking lot, if there's an alley, and that's the process that we walk through with those restaurants. From a citywide standpoint, the other applications that have come in have been throughout the city. So it not only in the business districts, but also other areas where we have restaurants that have been able to utilize their parking lots to really provide a comfortable experience for outside dining, as well as at least in the business district, the alleyways as well. Not so much in other alleys that I'm aware of.
I appreciate that. I'm mindful of, and I know Councilmember Gordo is also mindful of, we have other, small restaurants in other parts of the city that may not be, may not be as in tune to the opportunities that are available from the city. But we want to make sure that residents in all parts of the city that have small commercial districts and restaurants are aware of and able to take advantage of these programs, even though the physical circumstances of their restaurants are far different from what we see in the major business.
Unmute.
Anybody else?
If I can just quickly respond to, I think Councilmember, what the committee struggled with on the issue of flexibility in other parts of the city, precisely the issues that you raised. And that's why, the challenge to the staff was, let's help people in every part of the city use space differently, whether it's the sidewalk or a parking lot or whatever public space. So the goal here is to help put in place a framework that people can use throughout the city, in every part of the city, to use public space and outdoor space differently to achieve the business goals that they're.
I appreciate that, and your recognition of the different circumstances. I just know that a lot of those are smaller business owners, and they may not be as in tune to what the city has to offer, even though we're always trying to push it out to them and guide them and hold their hand if necessary. We just want to make sure everybody is getting them.
One of the challenges is exactly that, because so many people, are busy looking at the cash register and trying to keep the doors open or trying to keep their business afloat, that, I think it may take us having, as some other cities do, business ambassadors that go out and talk to businesses and inform them and tell them, did you know this is available to you? Much like with the health department.